Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. All right. Well, hello, Evelyn. I am so excited to have you on. For the audience, we actually just met a couple of days ago, and I have fallen in love with you. So I'm so excited to have you on, and I just want to go ahead and let's dive right in. So for those of us that don't know you well, could you just give us a little background on your kind of who you are, your faith history, and then also what we're going to talk about. So your specialty today.
Sure. So I've been in Idaho now for just over 3 years. I came on sort of a whim. My employer in Portland purchased the franchise in Boise. And I said, heck, I'm up for an adventure. And so I came. It's culturally very, very, very different than Portland. And I have adjusted to the niceness of people, which is really good. Let's see. I've always had a really strong love for God and went to Gonzaga and got my degree in religious studies. And that was, Gonzaga, the Bulldogs. Yeah. That was really, really wonderful. It was really a great time. My mentor through high school was somebody lots of people know named Father Bob Spitzer. And so he taught me high school religion and then corresponded with me all the time. And he'd gone to Gonzaga, of course. And so he helped me with my application, told me I could major in anything I wanted as long as it was religious studies and I could pick my own second major. That was very helpful. But I always wanted to work with the poor. And so I did 12 years at the Housing Authority, which is government-funded low-income housing. Also, too, before I graduated, I became a secular Franciscan, one of the third orders of St. Francis. And I just squeaked in because I professed in April of 78, and in June of 78, they raised the age. They had to be 21 to profess. And so I just made it, which was great. So I worked at the Housing Authority for a good number of years. I really enjoyed it. And then my family time, we decided to move to Sisters, Oregon. It's a small little town. When we moved there was only 600 people, and now it's up to like 3,200. Yeah. So it's really, really big. Still no traffic light. They're very proud of that. And but when I was working at the Housing Authority, I would go on a walk at lunchtime unless I went to daily mass, and I passed a childcare center there in the city. And it was called Joyful Noise Child Development. And I had always said, if I ever did kids, that's what I wanted. That's the perfect name for a childcare center. And so when my family, we moved over to Sisters, and I'm like, well, I need a job. There was nothing going into a small town. And so I found a place where I could get a job and bring my daughter with me. She was 3 years old, and that was it. And so I started at what was called Sagewood School, which is now the Waldorf School of Bend, and she went with me, and I did the after-school care. And it was wonderful. I'd never met anything about Waldorf or anything like that, but I had my child with me, and it was really, really wonderful. And then in my little town, I decided after a few years to open up my own childcare center. And true to my memory, I named it A Joyful Noise, which is Psalm 103. And went through my Waldorf training for the grade school as well as early childhood. And I made that decision because there's not possible to open up an elementary school in Sisters. And so instead, what I wanted to do was to prepare the children the best possible so they could go and go to our local school. I mean, I would never want to break up the community in that way. And so after going through all of the grades teacher training, I started the early childhood training, and that was really it was really an eye-opener because they teach out of a different philosophy of the human being called anthroposophy. And I had my childcare center. It was going strong, doubled the capacity, the square footage and everything after just a few years. But when the 0809 economy hit, the town lost children. I mean, prior to that, the town had been so full they had to move fifth grade to the middle school building. And by the time it was about 09, probably about 10, they had empty classrooms in every building. Whoa. Because it had dramatically just lost. It's a tourist town. If you got no money, nobody's coming as a tourist. Okay. Right. I was very active in my parish there, one little parish named St. Edward the Martyr, and worked with the kids, taught religious ed, of course, had a good time. And the one thing I liked about Waldorf is that its founder had was very Christian and then evolved into his own philosophy. So I could use things like Advent and Lent, and it wasn't so divorced. And so sometimes they got a lot of Catholic spirituality without them knowing. And I had a good number of parents I could talk into being active again within the church and got their kids baptized. And it was really a very fun time with that. Also, when I had the childcare center, I was teaching continuing ed classes for other childcare providers because I wanted them to see another way than just television and plastic. And so I would go in and create classes, create the curriculum, whatever I wanted to teach for that series. And I would do that through the childcare resources and referral. Then I realized with the economy, and I closed my school, I decided to go to graduate school and get a master's degree in adult ed. Because if I can train the adults, that can trickle to the children. That is so critical. And so I did that my first year, still in Sisters, but the second year I moved to Portland to help a family member out. And all of a sudden, I still had a year to go. And it's like, well, in Central Oregon, I was a big fish in a little pond for my skills and expertise. But now I'm in this big sea and my skills are just like lots of other people. So I had to figure out what was I going to do. I was in the middle of the program, the Oregon State Adult Ed. And so a couple of our classmates were in the same boat. And so the question that bubbled up was, what makes my soul sing? And at that point I said, church, God, And so I had planned then, after finishing that master's degree, I know it sounds crazy, but I went and got another one, a master's degree in ministry at Catholic Theological Union. And I wanted to work for a parish. No one in Baker Diocese works for a parish. It's all volunteer based. And when I arrived in Portland in 2012, people actually worked for the church. And I'm like, I want to do that. And they go, no, you have to have a master's in theology. I said, well, I have a bachelor's in theology and a master's in something else. No, you have to have a master's in theology. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to go and get another one, fine. And so then I looked at all the schools, and the school, again, like I said, CTU, it didn't require a GRE. And that was my number one requirement. I did not want to sit for a graduate review exam of everything I had learned years ago. And so that school was great. I applied, I got accepted, and it turns out I got a full ride scholarship. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And they had a dorm, so I got to stay right there.
That's amazing.
And it was. I mean, it was amazing. Coming from Baker Diocese, the smallest diocese in the country, to Chicago, where the Cardinal's on television. And I mean, holy smokes, it was really amazing. And then having to going from very Orthodox diocese to where I'm calling the priest by their first name, it took quite a bit of, what do I call you, professor? And he said, you can just call me professor. I said, okay, because where I come from, you would be called Father so-and-so, and trying to adapt to that kind of thing. And then, going to school there was really eye-opening, especially living in the dorm, because we had what are called formators. Formators are members of religious orders who are going to lead the formation of their new people. And so we had all of these amazing men and women steeped in their religious traditions, learning how to be a formator. And so I got to have meals with them and conversations with them and learn. And I was just so surprised coming from my teeny tiny town without even a traffic light that we had Catholics in Bangladesh. Really?
Yeah.
It was just like, because one of the priests came. We also had a sabbatical program where religious priests, sisters would come just to have 9 months of relaxation and amazing talks and trips, just a sabbatical to try to re-energize them. And I got to interact with them and know them, and it was just a really great time. And so once I finished, I went back to Portland where the parish was and where the home where I had been living there, and became a DRE for a couple of years. And then I was at a different parish and the pastor was sick. And so he hired me full-time, the only full-time staff person, to become the pastoral minister. Mm-hmm. And so I was in charge of, I handled everything except liturgy and money. And so, all faith formation, writing safety grants for the facility, everything. And it was fun because then I could take some of my Waldorf stuff and now bring it to the parish, some of the traditions and things like that. And then with COVID, the church is shut down. And so then for the last 5 years, I've been working with a company called Home Instead, which helps seniors stay independent in their own home.
Oh, that would be really rewarding as well.
Yeah. And so what I did in Portland, which was the largest franchise in the country, was I trained them. And I trained them in that light of ministry of like, you're working one-on-one with a human being. You can't just clock in and say you're there. You have to, integrate. And then after a few years when I came to Boise, that I did lots of everything. I would work directly with the clients. I would do the training. I would supervise the caregivers. I'd do the recruiting, just much smaller office and stuff. And so that ended a couple of months ago, and I met you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I had noticed when we first met is that you have a real insight for people. It's like, so there's sometimes, I think they say this about Pope John Paul II. He would see someone and he would remember them, and I kind of get a little bit of that feeling. Same with Bishop Peter. Like when you meet him, he makes you feel so present to you. Yeah. And I kind of get that with you. It's like,
thank you.
You understand people and then you see them. Yeah. And I think that we talked a little bit offline earlier that it could have been coming from your training with Waldorf. There's a little bit of that in there, but I think you have a real gift for people, which is something that I think is very attractive for me. Yeah. So it's really neat to see your story. And I think that that's a tying line through everything that you've done is seeing the human person.
Definitely. Yeah. I love people. One of the terms I learned at a pro-life conference about 5 years ago was probably a little bit longer than that, with a Consistent Life Network, which is all about a consistent life. Again, no war, no death penalty, and of course no abortion, but it's consistent, is the old archaic word called sonder, S-O-N-D-E-R. And sonder is taking the moment, perhaps standing on a street corner or somewhere, just taking a moment and everybody going past you, let's say in their cars, and just recognizing and honoring that they're on their own journey and that they are full and complete as a human being as they are right at that moment. And I've loved to do that, just to stand there and just watch them and almost like bless them or pray for them as they're going by. And it made sense why there's so many novels out on every topic possible, because there's so many possibilities with people. Yeah. But also I love strangers. I mean, I like strangers a lot. I do. I like being a greeter at Mass and taking tickets for events, and I like them because and I do see them very, very much. But it also works a lot with children. I've done that a lot with children, that each one is their own individual person with their own history of who they are. Yeah. And it used to be a little awkward where I'd be at an airport and all the little kids would come up and talk to me. And I just have to tell the parents, don't worry, it happens all the time. I teach preschool, and they would just come, where are you? I'm like, but I'm just having a conversation of equals. Yes. And that to me is huge. And I believe in that equality of everyone.
I think one of the things that we had spoke about previously, again, we're having a conversation outside, and I was like, we have to stop.
Right.
We're gonna have the podcast before the podcast starts. But one of the things we talked about is sometimes it's helpful to have these starting boxes so that we can relate with someone, but then we have to be flexible and move out from that and see people as individuals, right, as well. So I think that your training and just your natural gifts that God is giving you, it's really prevalent that that's something that you've cultivated and focused on, and it's really beautiful to see. So
yeah, I do. Every person, I had an amazing experience when I was 9 years old, and I was watching television by myself. I come from a big family, but somehow I got to sit there right in front of the television. And it was a story about this cobbler who had had a dream and Jesus said, I'm going to visit you today. And so he was so excited. He got everything cleaned. He opened up the store, and he's waiting for Jesus. And this businessman comes in to drop off his shoes, and the cobbler's a little curt with him and just, hurry on. And then it was a ballerina with her toe shoes, and then it was a mom with some young children, and he had no time for them. And he'd go out at the edge of his storefront, and he's waiting for Jesus. He even stayed open late, and he was just getting so bummed. And that night he went to sleep, and Jesus came and says, well, did you enjoy our visit? And he said, no, I haven't stayed open late. I didn't see you at all. And he says, no, I was there in the businessman. I was me as the ballerina. It was me who came to you as that young mom. That changed my life. Oh my gosh, that changed my life as a 9-year-old, because every person has that spark of Jesus in them. And why would I want to harm my Lord? It was only later at Catholic Theological Union I realized, someone told me, oh no, that's called Martin the Cobbler from Tolstoy. And I'm like, okay. But it was still that thing that I, even one time when I was at the parish as a pastoral minister, again, very, very small. So I had all the kids work together, and they put that play on.
Did they really?
They did it for Epiphany, and it was just amazing to do that. And it was just because it touched me, I wanted it to touch them. Yeah. And that to me was an absolute seed that I have nurtured, because how on earth could I disrespect you? How on earth are you more important than somebody else? Or they were not. It's all an artificial construct. And that's why when I look at a child, they are equally Jesus, and they are whole and perfect right there who they are,
I like seeing, like you just said, they're whole and perfect just the way they are. Yeah, I think that oftentimes we get too busy. And I had a podcast with Andrew Furphy, and one of the things that he shared that was really profound to myself was he talked about this one point. He was sitting in prayer, and he said, Lord, I realize that I'm more in love with productivity than I am with you. And he said, I didn't go to adoration and ask you this question because I thought the person, our social media director was going to have a better idea. Yeah. And he kept going on through this list. And it really stuck with me, because I think it happens that sometimes we're so obsessed with productivity or even just being busy that sometimes we can miss people. Or I know that in myself as a mom, that 90% of the time, if I just had an hour, I wasn't disturbed, I could get the laundry done, I could get the dishes done. And it's almost like all day I am fighting to get that hour in so I can get the tasks done so that I could actually play with my kids. That I waste the whole day with their attention because I'm trying to get those tasks done, and I keep getting interrupted instead of just being engaged in that conversation with them or the things that I need to do and saving that for a different time. And granted, there's some things you just have to get done, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I think that oftentimes I miss
the journey.
I miss the journey.
Yeah. You missed the journey.
This actually brings me into one of my, well, no, we'll save that one. I'll put a pin in it. We'll come back to it. But so I guess to continue on with your story, I would like to ask, So when you thought of your faith and how it influenced your journey into early education, we're going to focus on that today. But how do you think that it influenced how you saw those kids before you got the training? So do you think that your faith was helpful in that training, and you could see Christ in them more because of your faith or because of the training, I guess?
Yeah, it would definitely be more of the faith, because Waldorf it uses a philosophy called anthroposophy, which was an offshoot from theosophy. And its founder had some really interesting ideas, like every child is up in the spirit world or heaven, and they choose their parents. That is there with that parent by choice. Okay, that happens, and I thought that, wow, that's interesting. I mean, it doesn't harm anything if the soul is eternal. Okay, interesting. But it's really my faith of seeing them as those individuals, and then coupled with the Waldorf training, because what Waldorf's goal is to remove the fetters, get things out of children's way to develop who they're going to be. Okay, that's why there's no television. That's why there's nothing plastic. You give them things of nature, is that you want to remove that. So where I had seen the uniqueness of each individual from my faith, the Waldorf training helped me to see a method of promoting that development, of being able to say, no, I mean, I just remember this one, I think she was 4, and her dad wanted to spend quality time with her. So he had her on his lap every morning watching the news. And so she comes to preschool saying at snack time in front of everybody, well, Miss Evelyn, do you know there's people in another country that want to kill us because we're Americans? That's not what you want any child to have to worry about. Why have we just polluted them with that grown-up stuff? And so the Waldorf way of trying to let them see a world that is beautiful. Let them see a world that is trusting. And so that happens by removing some of the societal things. So I would definitely say grounded within my faith understanding of the human being, the dignity of the human being, but then really fleshed out through my Waldorf training. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to move into the Waldorf, because I can't resist anymore. So one of my first questions I have is, so you talk about getting rid of plastics, which in my life right now, I'm kind of on this kick of we need to get rid of a lot of plastic. But the one things I haven't got rid of are some of my kids' toys, because they enjoy them, like cars and stuff. Right. And I actually had a lot of, we did the Love Every boxes for a while. Have you ever heard of that company? Okay, so it's a Montessori. I guess we should go into that in a second. But it's a Montessori-based play subscription that you get every 2 to 3 months, depending on the age of your child. So starting at newborns, it goes up to, I think it's every 2 months for up until a year. And then it goes to every 3 months for a year to, I think they go up to 5 or 6. And they get new toys. And they're all wood.
Right, good.
And they're all developmentally
appropriate.
Based. So one of the things I noticed is some of the toys my kids really love, and some of the toys they don't like at all. And which is normal just for preference. But I have noticed that we've gotten a lot more plastic as my kids have gotten older, because those are the toys that they enjoy more.
Right.
So is there something necessarily wrong with plastic itself, or is it that most plastic toys also make noise and flashlights and that kind of stuff?
Well, in the Waldorf philosophy, you want to have them grounded in nature as much as possible. All right. And plastic comes from fossil fuels under the earth. Okay. They're not on the earth. It's under, compounded from the dead things. Okay. To create plastic. There's no life. They've never had life. Okay. A wooden thing has had the life of the tree. It's had life in it. Where the plastic, who cares?
It's come from dead things.
It comes from dead things, and they're usually bright colors. They usually often will make noise. They're not repairable. They were not handcrafted by, someone who creates with a living thing. So the big thing about the wooden things is that it had come from life. I mean, it's just so, so important. And I would just ask your kids why they like this toy. What is the aspect of it? That's an important part. But like even in the Waldorf classroom for early childhood, the color of the walls, if you came in, you probably wouldn't notice. You would think they were just sort of off-white, but they're actually
beige.
a light pink. It's the color of the womb. No, always in early childhood, the colors in grade school changes every year for each one. But the early childhood is always a very specific kind of a light pink because that's the color they see in the womb. And that's where we want to leave them until the age of reason when they're ready for school. So the biggest thing then about plastic is it's dead. It's never had life.
Yeah.
And, and I remember one time, we like to build forts in Waldorf early childhood all the time, cotton sheets and things like that. And someone had bought us a big silk, really lovely. But what I worked really careful with the children was to respect that and fold it up carefully and put it away because that was the life of all those worms that had to die to create silk. And so that deserves respect on that. So a lot of it is what has life and what has death.
That's really beautiful, actually, in a way, because it kind of makes me think there's some people might say, oh, that sounds really new agey, whatever. But at the same time, I think it's a real respect for God's creation, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what, regardless of what, kind of philosophy it may come from, there's still some respect in like this was something that it actually ended up coming from God, which I mean you can say everything comes from God, right? But like you say in the plastic though, there was some life that God had intentional, like he intentionally created something to live, and then you're using that, and there's this beauty in respecting it, right. So I think that that's a really interesting point. What I do want to stop before we get too far into the Waldorf is a lot of people, I think, understand Montessori, or they've heard it before. Maybe it's like a buzzword that they've kind of, heard as they're raising children, or they see now with people that have friends and they're talking about these different types of schooling or whatnot. But so could you give me just like a brief difference between Montessori and the Waldorf philosophies?
So in the grade school level, they're very similar. The teacher stays with them. In the Montessori program, they stay every 3 years. They change teachers. Within the Waldorf system, the goal is to have the same teacher from first grade on. Okay. They do home visits every year at the child's home. Okay. With Waldorf. Okay. In Waldorf. They have to make sure that the first grade teacher is at least 25 years old to start, because he or she has to be through their transition to adulthood by the time that they become into middle school. Okay, you need a teacher who's a firm adult to be able to guide them through puberty. Okay, so that's an important part. So sometimes the Montessori and the Waldorf in the grade levels are going to look very similar or more similar. In the Waldorf school, they don't ever have textbooks. The children have to make their own textbooks.
I actually saw that in a first grade class because my friend teaches that, and it's so cool to see them draw their letters and then have like all the drawings that they chose to mark like what a 5 is, right? How many pieces, so cool.
Or
so
cool. The letter R is great, and you have the Tower of Rapunzel, and there's her hair out and her hair hanging down, and because that's again how they teach language skills. Okay, because in first grade is where their first time they're given numbers and letters. Okay, we don't waste our time in early childhood on that because they're ready and prime at first grade. Okay, so that's a biggie. Another huge difference is that when Maria Montessori and the founder of Waldorf, his name was Rudolf Steiner, they were not, I think they're contemporaries, okay? And Maria Montessori had it very exciting, what she's working on with the children and things. But by the time people had come from around the world to visit with her and learn her techniques, it was all over the world. And when she went to court to try to basically to trademark her name and her things, the court said, you're too late. Okay. So anybody, me, totally not trained in Montessori, could open up a school and say, I'm a Montessori. Anybody can.
Interesting.
Waldorf or Steiner was on top of it. Okay, he was an Austrian gentleman, and so he did trademark it. And so even though I had A Joyful Noise for over 10 years, I could only say an aspiring Waldorf school, because I would have to go through all the credentialing in order to do that. So that is a really, really critical part.
So hold on, before just to flesh that out. So you're saying when you got your Waldorf training, you would have had to go through not just early...
Not the school. The school would, not me as a teacher. The school would, who wants to use the word Waldorf.
Okay. So you got all your training, but since your school since your early
I didn't go through the accreditation.
Gotcha.
With it, right?
Okay. Sorry, right. I'm following.
Yeah. So it's an accreditation thing. So that's like your friend at
Peace Valley.
At Peace Valley doesn't say Waldorf. Because they can't use the name without meeting the standards. And as a public charter school, they can't integrate in all the spirituality that is in a normal Waldorf school. Okay, because it's a public school, right? But anyone, because again, it was just the legal issue, anybody can open up and call it Montessori. I mean, I even saw one place call it Waldorf, like trying to blend the two together. Yeah. But the early childhood, which I'm most familiar with, that is where they are very different. The environment, the class could look the same, the toys, things like that. So in a Montessori program, and again, I've only gone to workshops and things put on by Montessori to try to understand the other guys, is that the teacher is a guide and not a teacher. And so they will have, let's say, toys or things like that, and the child goes and gets them. They've got their own individual play mat. They get their toy out, they play. If another child wants to come and play with them, they have to ask, "May I play with you with this on their hand?" The child could say, "Yeah, but you have to help me clean up," or "No, I don't want to do it." Things like that. When they're hungry, they go to the snack station. They get their own bowl out, get their, let's say, cereal, pour their own milk. All those wonderful independent skills. Okay. So when the teacher realizes that they might not be using a toy or a manipulative, then the teacher would call the class together, maybe re-demonstrate it, and again make it available for the kids. It's very individual, singular based. Okay, they don't have to play together. They have their mat. They have their independence in that way. They don't eat together. It's a snack when they're hungry. To build those individual skills, okay? They don't build that community. Maria Montessori believed that the children until age of reason, roughly 7, should not live in their imaginations. All right? Waldorf says the exact opposite. I'm like, holy moly. No, they are fully in their imagination until they have changed teeth. Until they can reach their hand over and touch their ear. Okay? Those are really requirements before you would ever move into a concept. So a concept is something you can't touch. You can't touch the letter R. You can't touch manners. I mean, you can't touch the number 4. Okay? Those are concepts. So Waldorf early childhood would never have concepts. Only reality. Okay. In Waldorf early childhood, it's all about community. So if a child goes to the shelf, picks up a toy, and they're working on something, and then they move on to something else, well, another child comes in and does it. One man's trash is another man's treasure kind of a thing. But then when the free playtime is done, then the teacher, everything is sung, always sung. And so the teacher then sings the cleanup song, and they're responsible for cleaning their room. Not my stuff that I touched. Their room. That is their classroom. It's building that reverence of community. When they go to have snack, of course, there's always a blessing before they ever eat, but it is always communal. It is never. No, eating is not a skill of pouring my milk into my bowl and not spilling. Eating is communal. And so that is the early childhood part. They're totally different, though the space may look the same with all the wooden things and things like that. So in early childhood, we want them in their imagination. In fact, there's in a real Waldorf school, there's no books in early childhood. The teacher tells the story every week. Light the candle. first, because story time, passing on the tradition is really important. So the candle is lit, they're sitting there and listening, and it's the same story for a week. The same one. Because what they're doing is they're developing their picture making skills in their imagination so that it becomes alive. Because what's going to have to happen is that they're going to need those picture making skills for reading comprehension. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because otherwise, so many kids now, oh my gosh, they can mechanically read, but they don't know what the story is.
Yeah.
They don't know what they read. They know the words. And I tell every parent who's stuck like that, I'm like, stop, put them on audiobooks. They have to develop their picture making skills. Without that skill. Okay, so Waldorf is very much about building the community. And so I've seen it, and each class has its sort of name in early childhood. So like my class was the butterflies, Miss Shauna's class was the frogs, just different things. And so they could all be on the playground, and I would just sing my song, butterflies come to me, and they would come to me because that's, like the shepherd and the sheep, they know my voice. Yeah. And so that... Yeah, and in fact, I talked to a couple of moms whose kids had gone through Montessori up through kindergarten and then went to public school. And I said, how'd they do? Well, both moms told me they had horrible behavioral issues because they had never been as a group, having to move as a group. They're so used to being wonderful independent thinkers, and they are, but that was not what school's made for. Yeah. You got to remember, public school was created specifically to benefit manufacturing.
Yes.
And that's why they're all put together by date of manufacture, the date of birth, not by their skill or their interests. Mm-hmm. It's just based on your birthday. And it's like... horrible Taylorism, yuck. But yeah, so I like Waldorf. And so even if a kid is the right age or whatever, if they haven't had new teeth and they can't touch their ear with their hand, their body's not ready to move on to concepts.
That's so interesting.
So it's very different than Montessori.
Yeah.
And but Montessori equally believes in needing wood and natural products around the children.
Well, and I see you talked about the Wolf-Montessori or something like that.
Yeah, putting the two words together.
And I can see how each one has extreme value.
Yeah.
Because the independence of being able to go to the fridge and pick out your snack and get your cup out of the bowl and the responsibility of having to put it back in the sink and that kind of stuff. That's,
a chore.
Those are good routine things, I think, for parents, you know, for just anyone, but then also the community aspect of like having the buy-in. Right. Yeah, so obviously I see benefits between merging the two together because there's the independence and the community and having buy-in for the child.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm thinking about my own home, right? So I have a newborn,
right,
and I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old,
right,
and cleanup time we have. I was thinking about that, and it's like, oh, you clean up your toys. Ellie needs to clean up her toys, but we all have to clean up the whole living room. So I kind of see a mix of both in there, but I like what you're saying about it's not just my space. All of us use that space. My husband uses it. Mom uses it. The kids use it.
Right.
So we really need to be collective in treating our things nicely.
But it's also balancing a skill that you want them to have.
Right.
Which is different than communal cleanup. So you want them to have that skill or that recognizing, because another year you're going to say, I wasn't the last one to touch it. Okay. And you're just going to have that. One family did where they had a boy and a girl very, very close in age. And there was just this gut feeling the boy should have been an only child. So what the parents did, and they were much, much older, like, I don't know, in their 40s when they had him. What they finally had to do to keep peace was they put one on odd days gets this, the other one on even days gets that. Who gets to ride shotgun? Who brushes their teeth before they put their pajamas on? They had to do, everything had to get that way because they needed peace. And that's a fine skill. I mean, that's just one technique to be able to create the peace that you need, the structure. Yeah. But that communal, it's our space. It's sort of like the philosophy of of money. Why, some people only want to give an allowance because they've done their chores. And it's like, no, the chores are because you're part of the family.
Yeah.
The money is a learning tool. Like, we would not withhold books from people. So why would we withhold money? Because it is a skill to learn. It's not a bribery.
Yeah.
The family's not the employer. It's like it's something you need to learn how to use respectfully and save up for and give to the poor. And, and so rather than saying, if you get all your chores done, you get this money, especially when they're really little. I saw one family, it was fun. She was a single mom working, and she had, I think, 11 and 12-year-olds, so they were safe home alone. But she took their allowance and she hid it in smaller denominations around the house. So only if the one who was properly dusting would find all of the money that made her allowance.
Now,
I thought that was so cute.
Yeah. I was going to say that because that would be it's also a good skill because you're teaching them how to be detail oriented.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. And if they didn't do a good job dusting, or they only dusted things that they thought needed it instead of everything, they just didn't get their whole $2. They only got $1.50 or something.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was cute, but it's not bribery in that way. It's a different way. There's one thing that's really, really important. I got taught this, oh my gosh, in high school. When I started high school, the YMCA for the very first time was offering latchkey after-school care. It had never been offered. It was like 1971. And so they asked for volunteers from the high school. And I'm like, I love kids. So I started at 14 working at after-school program. And we had at a different building, a much larger building, we had the kids who might be in the gym, or they might be in a classroom for activities, and over here. And I remember complimenting a child coming in of saying, oh, wow, you're just being so good today. And the director said, I know you're young, I'm investing in you, but you're only seeing their behavior right now. You don't know the chaos they just caused, either in the gym or there. So target that praise to what you're seeing right there.
Yeah.
Because we don't know that, that history with that. And that was a good lesson. Oh, I know. It was the grandma rule. Same boss. And what he had said is, we want to use the grandma rule. Okay. When you say, if you clean this up, you get your allowance, it's a bribe. Mm-hmm. If you say, though, when this is cleaned up, we'll go out for ice cream. Just the shifting from the if to the when.
Yeah.
It's old-fashioned called the grandma rule, because I'm not trying to bribe you. I'm not dictating your behavior at that moment. But when it's done, this reward is waiting for you. And it stops all of that nagging and everything.
That makes me feel so much better. Because I always feel like I'm bribing my kids, because Aaron and I, we try to get our kids to eat all their food, especially their protein and vegetables. Those are the things that have to be your carbs.
Right.
You don't have to eat your carbs. But your protein and your vegetables, even berries and stuff, you don't have to eat them. Yeah. They always do, but you don't have to eat them because, veggies and carbs, or veggies and protein.
Yeah.
And always after, he's like, can I have more berries? You may have more berries as soon as you eat all of your protein.
Right, yeah.
And I always feel like I'm bribing him to just get the...
You actually use the word when. When this is gone, these are available for you. Just when. And that takes your anxiety or your tug of war out of it.
Yeah.
He has a choice. Yeah. When this is finished, I have these available. Don't forget. I mean, leave extra 5 berries or whatever. I mean, don't let him not trust you.
Right.
But totally just shifting things to when instead of if. Huge tug of war, because if you say if, they have the power. I'm not going to do it. Yeah. But if you say when, I've got the power. Yeah. And I have that, therefore have the ability to be calm in that power. It's not a tug of war.
Here's a good question for you. Oftentimes I see things on the internet, or I'm reading books, and it seems like this is targeted for older kids. It's usually has to do with discipline or power struggles or all of that. And I'm like, for me, the power struggle I have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm still having that power struggle. And it just doesn't seem like the advice that I'm getting is applicable to a young child. So like for example, one of the things that I've read recently was this book called No Drama Discipline. And I didn't read all of it, to tell you the truth, but I did get a little bit into it. And it talks about asking your 3 questions. So like, why are they having this action? What do I want to teach from it? And where will we go from there?
Okay.
And I'm like, that's great. But how do I apply that to, because some of their examples were all older kids, like 5 and up, 6 and up.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really hard to apply that to a 3-year-old.
Right.
So can we talk about what kind of motivations or different things for power struggles that are appropriate for a 3-year-old? So are asking some of those questions helpful as a parent?
To your own internal dialogue, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
I wouldn't ask him. I wouldn't want him to come to consciousness that much. In the Waldorf tradition, we want to leave them in that dreamy state until they're ready for school. We want them not to have that responsibility. We want them to be able to be in that trusted cocoon of family. And so, I would look at that specific kind of behavior.
And I guess this is related to discipline specifically, like trying to teach a lesson or to stop a behavior. So I want to preface that into this answer.
Sure. So let's say if they're, hitting, you've got to try to figure out, why are they hitting? Is it out of anger? Are they trying to stop somebody? Because there's a few reasons. I'm trying to stop you from getting this thing that I want, or I want more. I always want to look at that underlying reason, because they have, limited tools that they've got to be able to survive. And, a child really only has 3 things they control when they're your age, little. They can control where they go to the bathroom. They can control what they eat, and they control whether or not they want to go to sleep. Okay. Other than that, they have no power in their world. I mean, they can't decide much. You say go to bed, but they decide not to go to sleep, or they're going to keep themselves awake by anything they can. That's the only place they have power. So rather than trying to figure out a struggle, that power balance, as the mama, you've always got that, you're at the 10,000 foot, you're like that guardian angel. You're just like, all right, there's something, what's going on. One example, I remember I had 2 little ones in a fight at preschool, and one just hit really hard and the other one is just crying. Well, I sent my assistant to the one that was crying, and I went to the one who had hit, because something had to happen to get to that point, that their needs weren't met, or there's something. And I went and gave them just the biggest, warmest bear hug and enclosure I could, because something in them had gone haywire. And so I don't want to look at just the behavior, okay? Because that's going to be totally different when someone just loses their cool, or they're frustrated, the other child won't give them enough room or tries to take their stuff and they hit them, compared to somebody who's going to hit just because they can, And so it's really, again, knowing your child or anyone's child, and trying to figure out what's the base motive for it. And they think differently based on their ages.
Right. Well, so one of the things you said is you would go to the child that hit, and then you'd send your assistant to the one that was hurt. Right? So as a parent, when I'm home alone, I don't have that.
Right.
So when you're talking with parents and it comes to a struggle like that, where do you start? Do you start with the child? So if we're thinking about a 3, 4, 5-year-old, do we think about, do I need to comfort the child that was harmed first? Or do I go to the person that,
the victim.
Yeah. Do you go to the victim or do you go to
For me, it depends on the age. Okay. The younger, I would go to the victim. I would go to the perpetrator, the one who'd hit, because something had really happened to do that. When they were like 3 or so. 3 years old, that young.
And are they hitting someone of equal age? Or
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
No,
cool.
They're doing a behavior you don't want.
Yeah.
And you're doing a behavior, but you know your child. Is there a point that they just lose it? Or is it a certain toy that's their special toy? Is it, what is it? So like say they're fighting over a toy and, the older hits the younger and, one's really angry because they won the toy. And now the other one is hurt and hang on the toy even more. I put the toy on timeout. The toy goes on timeout because the toy is, the center of this aggravation. And so, it's again knowing why they hit. I mean, what was the purpose of it? Why did they bite? Why did they, it's understanding that and not just looking at a, black and white kind of a thing.
Yeah.
We have to, that was what was so fun with the Waldorf is I knew my kids. One of the things we did every night is assume they're in bed. So probably after 9 p.m. Every night I would sit in meditation and prayer and envision their guardian angel standing over them. And I would ask the angel, what do they need from me tomorrow? Okay, I would use the spirit world. I would use those powers. What do they need from me? And so I've taken that time, child by child by child, before I go to bed. I always make sure they're sleeping, their normal sleep time, to do that. In the Waldorf philosophy, we believe that whenever a child, an early child, so under the age of reason, goes to sleep, their soul goes back to the spirit world for refreshment. And I know it's one of those little airy-fairy things, but it doesn't hurt. And it comes back. So the child is born new every time they wake up from a nap. So would never have done a punishment from something they had done before the nap because they've already been refreshed, just by the sleeping.
Yeah.
And so timing's going to be really critical. And as they're getting older, what are our family standards? Our family standards are inside voice, gentle words, kind hands, and walking feet. And I'm just like, oh, you didn't follow that rule. It's one of our 4 favorite rules in our family. Oh, when they're older like that, again, then I can go ahead and deal with the one, the victim. All right. And anybody in a big family is going to tell you the second child is never caught. Second child goes and bugs their big brother or sister. The second child is never caught. So I don't ever assume there's an innocence on anybody. Yeah. And so it depends as they're growing, then I might need to go to the victim who could have easily been the manipulator.
Yeah.
But once I've got my family rules up and saying this is what we do, it's like, oh. And when they see your disappointment, you're everything to them. Oh, we did not have gentle hands today, did we? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a fan whatsoever of making kids say sorry. Okay? At all.
It's like my number one thing we do. You have to say sorry. Go ahead.
Because so when you're teaching religious education for sacramental prep, all right, for helping the kids understand, sorry is this thing. I'm the one who did it. And I go drop this at your feet, say, sorry, I'm all done. I'm free as a bird. Okay, but you, there's no guarantee you picked it up. No guarantee you have accepted my sorry. Okay? Instead, certainly for sacramental prep, it's like, no. So when I say, please forgive me, I'm actually giving my power over to you. And you can say yes or you can say no. All right? I now become vulnerable. If I'm saying sorry, ka-bump, I'm just giving it off to you and I'm done. There's nothing out of me to say sorry. In fact, as the kids get older, they'll just go up and hit you and say, sorry. Go hit you, get sorry. So you got to think through what is the purpose. Instead, it'd be like I would stand with the perpetrator looking at their friend who's crying and just say, oh, look what happened. Help them to feel that emotion. Help them to see that consequence. Because if they're not seeing the victim, then they're only going to be worried about what happens with you. You know, they're only be worried about getting a timeout chair. They're going to be worried about, wait till your father comes home. But if I can stand with them and say, oh my, look how she's feeling. Look at her face. Okay? Because sometimes they only see what they want, the toy or whatever. But if you stop and you say, look how sad she is. Look. 1,000% better than just sorry.
Well, and I also like what you said about saying, will you forgive me?
Yes.
I actually heard this on another podcast years ago. I mean, probably like 6-7 years ago, where they said in this program, I think it was with Net Ministries, they actually make you say, will you forgive me? And the other person has to forgive them.
Yeah.
But,
right.
but they say that, and it makes a huge difference because it's kind of like confession where you go and then you get absolution.
Right.
So
you're making it whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and again, if you look at what reconciliation is, okay, meaning again and again, con, the word, meaning with, and cilia, it's eyelash to eyelash. That's what reconciliation is. It's eyelash to eyelash. So if I've got someone who has harmed their friend, who normally is their friend, or at least classmate, I could stand with them at their level, get down to their level, and just say, and look at their face, and look at that. How does it, because sometimes they're not thinking about it. They're only thinking about winning the toy over or whatever. And I want to have them look at the person and see that impact.
So I want to say, I love what you're saying. And I'm like, yes, this makes so much sense. 3-year-olds
are horrible. Nobody ever, they always say terrible twos. It's never terrible twos. It's 3-year-olds. Terrible twos just sounds cute. 3-year-olds. When a child turns 3 within the Waldorf philosophy, they move from being a child of God to a child of man. And 3-year-olds, again, within the Hispanic community, it's when that's when they're dedicated to the Lord, is at 3. 3 is huge. 3 and 9, huge child development models, huge. And so, they're definitely, and it's almost sometimes it's like turning a page, they're that different.
Yeah.
And so 3, and again, you have small space. You said your home is just small space.
Yes. Yeah.
And so with him, your lovely little one, I've had great conversations with, it's, again, looking at where's the boredom, what else can distract them, things like that.
So I want to go into that just for a second, and hopefully this will help someone else that has small children. Because I think there's actually a growing number of young Catholic families that are having kids pretty close together. So again, I have a newborn, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So when my son, when he hurts his sister, and you're right, sometimes I see her egging him on, and I'm like, stop that. Because it does happen.
Yep.
But when that happens, and I have said, doesn't she, she's crying.
Right.
Does that look like, and he's just like, So and we also had talked about this, and maybe we can go into this next, which is the temperaments, right? Yeah. And he is, I can't tell actually if he's sanguine choleric or choleric sanguine. We can go into that in a second. But when you see that in him, when I see that in him, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to handle this. And so I'm like, you need to go sit in timeout, because it seems like that's the only thing that I can reach you. Which, because again, if I just say, will you say sorry? And maybe I can change the language there a little bit. Or I even started changing the language to before, if I catch something before it comes to a fight, I'll say are you being a good leader? Right. Right. Yeah. I'm trying to make little changes like that. Yeah. But for a lot of it, it just doesn't reach him.
No, he's 3. He's 3.
So do I just keep telling him every time she gets hurt? Look at her face. Look at, she's crying.
It depends on you. A lot of it's going to be your positioning and your tone. Okay. You're going to have to be down at his size. So you're seeing what he's seeing instead of up here where you're just, and then, hey, let's take a look at her together. Oh, wow. What do you see? Okay. And have him actually voice it. Have him use his words. Otherwise you're declaring, look how you made her feel. Yeah. But he doesn't own it. But once you have him, tell me what you're seeing. Have him participate in that. And that, because again, doesn't know cause and effect yet. Cause and effect is age 21? Cause and effect is a long time to go. Yeah. And so, it's just what you want out of him might not be age appropriate at this point. You know?
And I think that might be some of it too, is like you said, I've heard people say the threenager, right?
Oh, also, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's another one.
Yep.
But yeah, I feel like right now it seems like anything that we do doesn't really
impact him.
Yeah. So I guess, I would love to continue on with that about responsibilities, but I also think we should put a pin in that and come back to the temperaments really quick. So in Waldorf, how important are the 4 temperaments?
Very important for child development. Absolutely.
Can we go through what the 4 temperaments are? So there is choleric, sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic, and how I've understood them to be, and please elaborate on this, is the choleric is kind of like the leader. So the book I read recently talks about natural virtues and lacking in virtues.
Okay.
To say it. So they're like kind of like the natural leader. They have qualities that help them become a good natural leader. Then there's the sanguine, which is the friend. They're the person that is very sociable, go with the flow, happy-go-lucky kind of person. Then there's the melancholic that is usually more of like the slower, deep thinker kind of person. They also can be like what you said, the Eeyore, right? They are prone to being
they see the bad side of things. Yeah.
And then there is the phlegmatic, which I've always heard as the peacekeeper, right? So they can often so they're the peacekeeper. They can often take other people blame for other people's things so that they can keep the peace, right? I've heard that. Those are kind of how
that one author
kind of has explained the temperaments. And I know that you've explained it through AA Mills.
Through Winnie the Pooh. And there's quite a few different ways, certainly within the Waldorf way as well.
Let's go ahead and have you give your example, because I also think it's helpful.
Okay.
So do you want to talk about AA Mills?
So first, Winnie the Pooh, that's the easiest way for non-Waldorfians to understand. Okay, so we describe them a little bit differently. All right. So the cholerics love red. When they walk, you can just watch their gait. Okay. They're heel stompers. They're the ones who wear the heels of their shoes out. Okay. Those are the cholerics. And that would then go with Rabbit in Winnie the Pooh. All right. Then you've got the sanguine, and within Waldorf, sanguines, they're the kids, when you watch them walk, their heels don't touch the floor. They're toe walkers. Okay. They're just, doesn't matter if they're adults or men or women. You can just see they're toe walkers in their gait. And they like lots of things. They're the kinds that get distracted with shiny things. Yeah. All right. And so that's then is for the sanguine is going to be, of course, Mr. Tigger, who can't stop anything. Okay. Then you've got the melancholic. Melancholics are always drawn to blue. Melancholics often feel like they don't fit in their bodies right. Okay. Melancholics, and it's not like melancholia where there's depression. Depression's got nothing to do with it. It's not a feeling. It's more of a temperament. And melancholics then are going to, when they see an obstacle, it's like game over. Okay. So like Eeyore, he's expecting something to show up. It doesn't, and he's not worth it anyway. Just
Don't
like that.
Don't you see it's my birthday?
Right.
Where the present? Don't you see the presents? The balloon, the cake.
Eeyore is wonderful. Yeah. Okay. And then you've got the phlegmatic. Now, phlegmatics they're the ones who expend very little energy. They are more green based. They're from the word phlegm. Okay. They are very water oriented, and they love food. You'll find a phlegmatic who has tons of cookbooks and never cooks because they just love food. Doesn't have to be the eating or the prepping of it. The idea of food, okay, is just amazing. Okay. So the phlegmatic, who is that? Our favorite Winnie, who's always, you motivate him anything with honey. Okay. And then the other story I really like to use when I'm explaining them to new audiences is the story about going down this path. You go down this very narrow path with the forest on either side, nice and tight, and you come across this big boulder in the way. All right. Well, the sanguine's going to come down that path, see the boulder, twinkle toes over it. Doesn't matter. Nothing's going to stop him going. The choleric, with that little heel stomp, the choleric's going to come, see that boulder. That boulder's not going to get over them, and they're going to just stomp right over the boulder and keep going. Okay. Then the phlegmatics who barely really pick their feet off the ground enough so they don't trip. They're the ones who can trip upstairs, okay? So the phlegmatic's going along and sees that boulder and then stops and looks at it from this side, looks at it from that side, and makes that assessment. Yeah, I can get over it. And off they go, and they keep going. The melancholic then, who's going along their own meandering way, they see the boulder and turn around and go back. And it's so interesting. So within the Waldorf understanding of the child development, and that was one of the things that was so interesting to me when my daughter, because she'd gone through Waldorf early childhood, and when ready to enroll her in public school, and I asked the teachers, how much child development did you take in becoming a teacher? And they said, well, maybe one class. And I'm like, oh, okay, Waldorf is all about child development, all not techniques or things like that. And it was like crazy. Okay, so, and being able to understand it, the child then is born with a predominant temperament. Okay, but the goal of Waldorf education is to balance them between all four. That's the goal, to give them things. And so like if a choleric, they're strong and forceful at times. That's when in the preschool, I would bring in bales of hay and they'd have to roll them and try to build something with them. They needed to have a challenge, because if they win everything, what's the point? They need that challenge. So one of the reasons in Waldorf grade schools, they write with an old-fashioned fountain pen instead of a ballpoint pen, because what you're doing is you're training the will. I will this ink to make this letter. Ballpoint pen, you got it. Okay, we would never have markers in a Waldorf school. Markers are lazy man's art. Got color. No, the crayons are made of beeswax and must be pushed. You're building the will forces. The toilets need to have flushers, not some automatic thing that doesn't make them responsible. Okay, building the will. And so dealing then with children, you look and see what their temperament is. And in early childhood, in a classroom at least, it's mostly about trying to manage. When Rudolf Steiner was creating the education in grade school, because he did grade school first, he said the ideal classroom size was 50 kids. Okay,
50?
50, because he put all the sanguines together and all the cholerics together and the phlegmatics and the melancholics, and they would drive each other nuts to be able to not be that way, to stretch themselves. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, I love
Just amazing. Whereas in public school, my daughter's in first grade, and the desks are there, and the teacher was on her knees inside sort of a circle of the desks. One by one, each child is reading their little bit. There's no community. Mm-hmm. It's only that one-on-one. Whereas in Waldorf grade school, they're reciting together, and they're getting it together. But the temperaments are really, really fascinating when you can try to figure out. But below the age of 3, they're still, that's still too young to have it, so
solidified.
Yeah.
Does it change? Do your temperaments change then? Or what is the idea behind that?
The idea is to try to have some of all four, try to balance them out. American education doesn't. They try to treat you where you are at and just leave you there, okay? Mm-hmm. Whereas Waldorf tries to pull you, make some of the different temperaments uncomfortable with something, okay? Try to have the phlegmatics do something the choleric way. Mm-hmm. Try to have the cholerics do something, the sanguine way. I mean, just sort of those kinds of things. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have the same teacher for all 8 grades.
Because you really
get to know developing. Yes, you go do home visits every year. You're seeing where they were. There's one of my teachers. He told the story about this little boy who I think he was probably about 3rd grade, 4th grade, would never settle down at school, just never settle down. When he went to do the home visit, it turns out he'd had one of those beds where it had like the play area or desk underneath, and he was up here. He was never grounded to the earth, ever. As soon as the parents got his bed on the floor or closer like a regular bed, he was more connected. It was just amazing because you don't think of all of these ramifications that are playing into their nervous system and everything. And so it's just really, you know. And so when your little one, your big kid, is busy running around, what's your backup? All right. Now, many parents just give them a phone or a tablet. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if you've seen them. They're back from 50 years ago, at least, maybe 70. I saw them for really inexpensive, 99 cents at, I think it was Craft Warehouse. They're full of water, and you have a little button you push, and that goes up, and you've got to get at whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's what we had when we were little. What a perfect thing. It's equally engaging. It's fine motor skill. It's not fully winnable.
Yeah.
There's no immediate gratification for 99 cents.
Yeah.
Okay. And so having as a parent, what's my backup? Because too often it's a phone and food. And that's just not.
Okay. Well, I have a good question then. So for our family, and I know there's a lot of people that are trying to get away from TV. And so there's different things. Like one of the things I really love is our Yodo player. It's one of those little players that have cards. And you put the cards in that reads you a story. Oh. Because I could literally sit and read stories to my kids all day.
Yeah.
They
good picture making skills. Uh-huh.
So they have these little players and we love that.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the best investments, but I still it doesn't hold their attention because they usually do something else while they're playing with that, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
So it doesn't hold their attention like an episode of Magic School Bus.
Right.
Elijah loves Magic School Bus. It's his favorite show.
Oh, I don't blame him. I love science.
Mrs. Frizzle.
Yes.
I mean, who could not love Mrs.
And
Frizzle?
a school bus.
And a school bus.
I mean, yes. So again, you're engaging their head. Waldorf is all about head, heart, and hands. So you've got his head going. What are his hands doing? Okay.
Eating, usually.
Well, I would highly recommend separating them. So at preschool, we gave them actually pieces of beeswax, and they would warm it with their hands, and they would mold it while they're listening. Some people, public school, they tried it. They used the red wax off of a baby bell, something like that. So closer to dental wax than it is. So you can get beeswax. But they have to have something to do because that's how we're made. We're not going to sit still. So what is it? But what I would recommend is choosing a special thing only for that story time. So they have them associated. So you don't want to reduce its value by making it too available. And so only during story time, I remember this one mom, she told me how she got her daughter potty trained was when she was sitting on the toilet and the mom was sitting in a stool or something right there. That's when she told the horsey story. But the horsey story only came when she's in the bathroom. And so that did it. Or we had another one, a second grade teacher. She had just retired before we got there. But every morning, when the first bell rang, she would sit there and read a storybook out loud. And the children learned to come in quietly and put their things down. And they came in early because they wanted to hear the story. Little things like that. But yeah, head, hands, and hearts all at the same time.
Well, hear me out. So what I'm saying is like, yes, they do have stories of Magic School Bus, but we watch the TV show.
Yeah.
And we do it while I'm making dinner. So usually, I don't know if anyone else talks about this, but we've had a really hard time after naps, and my kids are really good nappers.
Good.
So they sleep from like 2 to 5 or at least 2 hours.
Yeah.
I at least get 2 hours out of them. And when they wake up, they know every day we get to watch an episode of Magic School Bus and mom makes dinner.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I could get it done.
Right.
So we usually I get like I've started to meal prep little snack packs that are like a veggie and a protein or whatever.
Yeah.
And they can have that while they watch Magic School Bus. So this is just, I'm telling you kind of what we've been doing. But I would love to move away from having watched TV because I do notice that after TV, especially if we watch a lot of TV, so if we're watching like 2 episodes, maybe like a Bluey, which is also a really good show. I love Bluey. I like it more than the kids do, I think. But anyways,
that's a credit to the writers. Yeah.
But we kind of have this little routine. But the more episodes I watch, I see the more meltdowns either that night or the next day, like the next morning.
Yeah, it's like a sugar high.
Yeah, dopamine hit. Totally. So, I mean, I would love to move away from that, but they also don't have the attention spans that I can get 40 minutes or 30 minutes of uninterrupted scripted, like, go time, let's get dinner on. And so in my head, I'm trying to reduce the time it takes to make dinner. But at the same time, I would love to move away from a show.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be for someone that's already introduced something like this as a tool?
Right.
And they would like to scale back or to eliminate it?
I would, after that first episode, have them act it out.
Ooh.
Yeah, have them act it out right there. If you can see them from the kitchen while you're food prepping, have them, Mommy missed the story. Can you act it out for me? All right. Something like that. Because again, you're helping with the picture making skills by doing that instead. I don't know if you're familiar with Kaiser Permanente did a study about 20 years ago, and they put 6th graders, 11-year-olds, staring at a wall or watching TV for 20 minutes to see who burned more calories.
Those are the wall starers?
Yeah, because they fidgeted. Because once you're engaged with that electronic engagement, your body goes still. Okay. And so they're taking all of that stillness of watching it and exploding afterwards. Okay.
Wow,
so if they were doing something while they watch that, or have them sit on a ball, get a little $1.99 ball and have them sit on the ball. So now they're building their proprioception, and it's just a 99-cent ball. So it's not going to budge, but now they're busy while they're watching that instead of just they're sitting there. They haven't burned calories.
Well,
so.
Not only that, but he's been napping for 3 hours
right.
prior. So he's like, woo! Like,
yeah, right. And again, if you have your timing right, and is to do something between the nap and that, now that you are, now, and again, you can say it's a brand new month or it's a brand new season. Now it's summer, things are changing. So if you don't introduce it like you're losing this, I've changed my mind, but no, it's coming, on June 22nd, it's going to be summertime and we're going to do this special as a family, and you get to build up. And in fact, helping them understand time is a really helpful thing. And how to do that is making those old-fashioned chains. Okay, like Christmas chains. Yeah. And so you've got it. First, you have them help make it, all right, the chain. And then every day, so this is going to change, let's say June 22nd, because it's coming up. And now you're going to take one off. And on this day, when our chain is down to nothing, now we're going to implement this new thing. Okay, so they have that sense of time that it's coming. And then you can put in, because if you can do something between the nap and now you've just doped them up on television, something in the middle, would just be able to give that. Waldorf education is all about being in your body. And so it's about inward, outward breathing. So you'd always have a quiet thing followed by an active, followed by a quiet, followed by active, always.
Interesting.
Always. So sleep is quiet. They need an active. Okay. So 15 minutes outside, or 15 minutes running around the house, or 15 minutes Jack LaLanne video or whatever. 15 something. Then they can go to quiet, comatose television. Then they get active again. But if you build your rhythm always, that's how our body is. Always. You build that rhythm into your day. That's for the immediate time. And then looking at routine, like this is Monday where you have a consistent snack or activity. And on Tuesday you do this, and on Wednesday you do that. And you help them build. And again, it's really back to your great grandma's time. Monday was wash day. Wednesday was ironing day. Okay, this happens, and you build that routine in. Then you're actually teaching them the housekeeping skills they're going to need as grown-ups, all of that. But you build it into a rhythm. And the more things you can standardize, the less stress you've put on top of them, less stress you've got, And so what some families do, every Monday is chili. Every Tuesday's tacos. Every Wednesday. One family goes every week because they have very picky eaters. Exactly the same thing every week. Another one has like 2 week or 3 week, and they just keep rotating it. Okay, and my sister always had Scrounge Friday. Once they hit grade school, they had to go eat leftovers on Friday nights. Just go to the fridge and get what you want, But the more we can take that stress off of you,
right,
then the happier you're going to be, and you can enjoy that journey.
Yeah.
And so if and you already know that, Ellie needs very specific kinds of food.
Right.
And so that just takes all of that away from you. And you can say, Saturday night or whatever night, this is mommy and daddy's special dinner, and we're going to have something different, and so it's not a leftover, they're not left out, but it's your time together, because the more they say you two love each other, they're going to grow up to seeing the world is safe. And that's what we want, safe kids.
Yeah. So one of the things in previous, I think it was 2 episodes of the Generational Catholicism series that Father Cintra's doing. So just for an overview, I don't know if you've been introduced.
I've only watched a part of one. I haven't. Yeah.
So the whole point of this series is to decide, or to figure out, to find the root of what makes Catholic kids. And they keep coming back to this thing of a loving and affectionate home.
Yeah.
And he had a couple on, and they were talking about how the parents' relationship is the biggest thing you can give to the kids, right? Is if you guys are in this position, then they can blossom because they're secure in your relationship, right?
Right. So, you model it for them.
Right.
Always. It's sort of like when I had the preschool, and the little kids would want to come and greet me with a hug. Every time it seemed, the boys would just want to give me like a bro hug. And I would say, no, you have to turn and give me a full hug. And I'm like, I'm raising dads. I'm raising husbands. And a bro hug doesn't count. No. You can't do that. Okay. And so I would actually make them come and hug me properly, because I'm training them up in the way to be a man. Yeah. All right. And that's what we want. We want both arms. Okay. Yeah, and so we do. And so we have to get that into them, know. There's a great quote by a Christian author named John Acuff that if you train a child up in manners, they know on their own by 16 how to be kind, because the manners are it's just what it is, We've got the grace before meals. We're, and why we do it. Explain as they're getting older, because yours are tiny, of just saying, no, we're clearing the table because we want a clean home and we don't want the ants to come in. Little things like that this is this is good stuff, and it's all of our home. And so,
I have another question, because when I'm thinking of cleaning house, I also go back to what we said about cleaning the living room together. So how would you deal with or what advice would you give to parents about sharing toys versus special toys? Like something you get on your birthday versus something that, maybe has been around the house for a while and now has become a communal toy. And how would you deal with someone that says, a child, even up to a 5-year-old, 7-year-olds have this too, where they're like, this is my special toy.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you deal with like toys and sharing and that kind of stuff with those kids? Because I'm thinking about, and this might not be helpful to everyone, but I'm thinking about my own house and how basically everything is out for everyone to use.
Right.
So what would you say in the Waldorf, and how would you kind of do that?
So within a classroom situation, I would use like a timer, and I always use sand timers so they can see it, and not a clock timer, which is time is not real. That's why we make countdown chains, right? Yeah. So we have a sand timer, and for a sand timer, all right, again, that's where sometimes with smaller families, you need to use the odd and even days for who gets to go first, okay? But you have a sand timer, so all right, this is your time to play with this right now by yourself. After that time, it's now available for everybody. You can keep playing with it if nobody else wants it, but you cannot forbid anybody from wanting to playing with it. I'm helping them understand what is their special toy. And if it is a special toy, and not everything I can touch is my special toy, okay, then have them have a special home for it. Have them develop a reverence for it. Okay, then they can model that for their youngest siblings. But if it's just their special toy of the moment, if it's just their special toy just right now, it's my special toy because you want it, doesn't cut mustard, They have them that identity, because I know for me as a parent, I ended up buying way too many toys for my child. Way too many. The thrift stores, the yard sales, they were so much fun. I thought you'd like this and you'd like that. And what I found was that her room was so full, and that she wasn't playing with them all. And I learned through my Waldorf education training is we want the child to have a relationship with what they own, have a relationship with it. And when I realized she had so many toys she never touched, I decided that when she was asleep at night, I would go and I'd remove 5 5 or 6 toys, and I'd take them to my bedroom, for couple of weeks, and if she never asked for them back, I'd move them further to storage, but just kept them in the house for another month or two in a box. But if she never asked for them, she never said, where did that go, or where's this, then she had no relationship with them. She had too many.
Yeah.
And so that was really, really helpful. And I was able then, because she really suffered from my fun of buying them and not her need for that. And so then I was slowly, without it harming her, removing the fetters that restrict your development.
Yeah.
And so I just would then go and put it away. So you have to see how they use the word special toy, and is it, and there are some things like, as they get older, if somebody makes a special model or makes something that's intricate, it is special. But if you can train them already to have that respect because it has a special home, it's sort of like many girls don't have all their stuffed animals. They exactly have their spot on their bed. That's their spot. So that's important because I have a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. They just leave it on the floor and they don't even notice they're dirty. There's no relationship there. There's no benefit.
I'm kind of in a purging spot right now, so I'm like, oh, this is going to be great.
Right.
But again, pulling things.
And again, you as the parent, that takes that observation. What do they play? What do they not play with? What...
What am I constantly cleaning up?
Right, yeah. And if you're cleaning it up, they are playing with it.
Right, exactly.
So what do you not? Yeah, right. And just say what needs to be dusted. But then you can take the things they don't have a relationship with, and you can give them to the poor. And you can do that as a family of saying, you know what? I know there's children who don't have anything. And this toy that you've taken such good care of, it's ready to go find a new home. Yeah. And then you teach that kindness because they have it. It isn't extra. And then you can also see if it's like, no, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Then you got some things to work on because a lot of times that's out of fear, FOMO. And it's sort of like, wait a minute, you're 3 years old and I don't want you to be fearful. So how can I ground you again and know that my love is always here, to be able to do that. But then you can clean out the house. It works really well. Yeah. When my daughter was, I was working at the Chamber of Commerce putting on all their events for them. And so there's a lot in a tourist town. And so she set up her own little table and she just started selling her stuff because then she learned entrepreneurship. She learned how to do this. And one time she did all artwork. And so she wanted only a penny a picture that she spent all this time on with her beautiful Waldorf crayons, and one man offered her a dime and she's like, no, it's only a penny. She hadn't quite understood about tips because we were so rural. She didn't quite understand about banking yet either because she was so out into the country. She had nowhere to go anywhere, nowhere to spend money. Though. But yeah, it was sort of like, but so there's so many things then that task can evolve into. Yeah. Into that can, again, you always want to serve the common good. Yeah. You want to serve the people of God and take it on and let it have another life, another life. Yeah.
So, one other question that I would like to ask you is, we've talked a lot about kids, but it's a two-way street. And so let's talk about parents for a second. When it comes to a parent, what kind of self-awareness do we need to have? Because a lot of us haven't been formed in a Waldorf or a Montessori or haven't even been emotionally
Right.
I don't
mature.
know. Yeah. So there's a lot of that that's going on and we're growing as well. So
So the first thing I would say is that parents are going to naturally parent the way they were parented. Mm-hmm. And they have to take a stop to that and realize certainly in a two-parent family, you immediately have a disconnect because you're raised by different parents. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to immediately have that conversation of what was it like for you growing up? What did you like about growing up? Just in that conversation, what did you see happen that you never want to do again or that you would never want to do to your kids? All those kinds of things. I remember when I was probably about 5, my brother did something and before dinner, my father laid him over the coffee table and took his belt off and just spanked them. And I'm like, we're never doing that. Okay. It was just sort of like, but if I hadn't talked it out to say, wow, that was a scarring memory, then my husband's not going to know why I'm shying away from this or that. So first of all, sharing your stories and also to listen to, not to listen to, but to be aware of how much the in-laws are chiming over you. Okay. Because again, they think they did right. Yeah. All right. They think no matter what their children think, like, oh, mother, no, that was bad. Or dad, no, I'd never do that. But they're not looking at it that way. And so there you have to see how much of the cacophony you have to close out, because it's you two, and then in that parenting. And then you really have to look at your social media. You have to look at all of these voices of who are you listening to? Because the question really comes down, if you boil it all the way down, is everything we do, either it gets us closer to God or takes us further away.
Yeah.
Period. And so that, if this person on social media says this, or I should try that, well, that's all about you trying it. But your experiment is your child. And that's not quite it. So on the parenting, it does take a lot of maturity to conscientiously do it. I remember this one mom. Oh, it was so sad. I had her 5-year-old. He just was ready to start kindergarten, and she comes in and she's got the baby picture in the womb. She's pregnant, and she's showing him and showing me, and then she aborts the baby like 3 weeks later, and I'm like, but he just told me he's going to have a little baby, and the world is bigger than the parent, it's bigger than the parent. And so realizing that your job is that, you're the guardians of the galaxy. Yeah. You're protecting the child. And sometimes that's going to have to be from, again, the social media is going to have to be all that. It's hard parenting. I mean, it's hard right now. And every time I see a young parent, it's like they believe they have hope for the future because they have a child. Okay. They're investing in that future. So, you have to know who you are. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to be reflex. It also impacts you dramatically with how you deal with money. How you deal with money is how you were raised as well. What worked for you as a kid, you assume will work for you as a grown-up. And so the money, in fact, they say more marriages break up because of finances than any other reason. And then looking at that child, it's huge. And to be honest with each other, I've seen some parents where they really like their kids once they're in grade school. They just sort of tolerate all the work to get them to grade school. And then they love it because they can go to the soccer games and this and that. And I've seen others where they love their kids when they're little and ignore them once they get into school. And everybody has kind of a favorite. And you have to, as a parent, fight against that. Because every moment counts. Oh, gosh. When I was working at the Waldorf School of Bend one summer, and I was a school administrator, and I was doing the after-school program, and we had a summer staff person the parents didn't like. And I remember the parents being so upset at this parent-staff meeting. And the lead parent, the lead board member said, yeah, but that teacher's only here for the summer. And the mom said, I want excellence now. Every day in my child's life counts. I can't tell him to hold your breath until September. Yeah. Every day counts. And if you can hold that importance, that understanding that everything's going to get me closer to God or take me away, and have that amazing responsibility of that child, and build in your timeouts for you, not for them, for you. Yeah. Because you have to know who you are because you're raising little yous, Yeah. And if you want them kind, or maybe sometimes parents will say, I didn't like how my parent did this, so I'm going to make sure I do the opposite. And sometimes that'll be fine, but sometimes they'll do it again, black and white thinking and not seeing the gradation that needs to happen. So it's, of course, always hardest to parent with two parents. It is, because you have two different histories. Right. But you have a rest. You have a rest.
Yeah, you have a partner. You have someone that can tap you in.
You do. I remember this one woman, she had two little boys. They lived in England. They came back to the U.S., all that stuff, and they got divorced. And she said, with this glum face, I can never walk out of the house without thinking again. You're right. You have to have them prepared and safe and all that stuff. You're right. And so the two parents, if you got that foundation of communications before children or while they're really small and really taking that time to examine it, then you're in a position to say, we do it together. Because what'll happen is they want to triangulate the parents. So, you build that. Well, daddy said I could. And it's going to always, that's where I always say, children should always have a voice, but never a vote. Yeah. They can voice, I really want to hear your input. I want to hear that, but you're not the decision maker. Daddy and I are. So you don't get to vote, but you will gladly hear you out. One of my favorite things to say for husband and wives, it's like, I hear you. I hear you. It doesn't mean I agree with you. I hear you. I hear you. And for the little ones too, I always use the hand motion. I hear you. Because I'm not just, I hear you. No, I hear you. I don't agree, but I hear you. And having that extra step makes them know you really heard them. Yeah. You're not just shouting from the kitchen, yeah, I heard you. No, I heard you. And it makes a big difference.
Or what I've noticed is my son, he started doing this recently. It's kind of off topic, but he goes, Mommy, are you listening? And I'm like, yes, I'm listening. Don't you hear me responding right back to you? Because I'll be like, oh, you saw a truck. He'll say, I saw a red truck. And I'm like, oh, you saw a red truck? Repeating what they say. Yeah. But sometimes I can do that and not really be paying attention.
Right, yeah. And you just have to explain, say, Eli, I'm really busy right now, and I'm really glad to hear you talk, but I'm really busy with some things that I might not be able to respond back to you. Yeah. And you just tell them.
So here's another one. Because our son is very vocal and he loves to talk.
He's a firstborn.
Yeah, he loves to talk.
Yeah.
Sometimes Aaron and I have a hard time. So we're talking about like us trying to hear each other. Sometimes we're trying to have a conversation. And it's not like something really intense, but we want to listen and be intent and respond intently. Right. And our son will be like, just pay attention to me.
He's jealous.
Yeah. So how do you deal with
what do you have him doing? So this is the time you're
usually
busy.
He's playing, and then he'll come over because he hears us talking.
Right. And again, that's where you'd have to just lay the line down and say, Eli, this is mine and Daddy's time to talk. Again, sand timers for everything. Get a 2-minute, a 5-minute, a 10-minute sand timer, and they can watch it. Okay, they can just watch the sand go down. And it's so helpful, and they're pretty inexpensive. Plastic are the easiest to get. Egg timers, they call them in the store. But again, just create those boundaries of because he wants to be the center of attention. He not only has to share you with two girls, but now he doesn't get you with daddy time. Yeah. The other thing though too, you might want to give him that time right away with a sand timer. Say, your time is up. Mommy and daddy need to talk. It's building in those rhythms and those times. This is every time you get up from a nap, you do this. Well, every time after dinner, mommy and daddy do that. And the more you can build it in his routine, he will have that guide for the behavior. Yeah. Because this is that time,
Yeah. Okay. So going back to us being a team, I think one of the things it reminded me of is the Messy Family podcast, and other people have said in different iterations, it's better to be right, or it's better to be wrong together than right separate. So the couple. Oh yeah.
Because as a teenager. Yeah.
So we've definitely been trying to talk about I'm really bad at this actually, because I'm the one that's home with them all the time. Right. And so there's different expectations. Like, Daddy has different things, and maybe this is because we haven't fleshed this out enough, but sometimes it's like, Daddy's really strict about no kids in the kitchen. Right. Mommy, it's like, I have so many battles, I can pick a day.
Right, yeah. So coming
into the kitchen.
Well, also, that's an opportunity for you to teach him to cook.
Right.
Because
Or-
the kitchen is right.
Yeah, and we have a gate, and so sometimes I shut the gate,
Yeah.
and sometimes the gate door's open, you know, and so there's different things. So we have these things where it's like one rule is really stern, and I've actually talked to some of my friends, and they have the same issue. So it's like sometimes they come home, and dad, since he's not been there all day, he doesn't know what's flied, what's not flied, and some things like shift. And so one is that mom needing to be more consistent. Two, does that need to be do we need to be better, like communicate better?
Well, no, it's again about the separating you guys and not doing it all together. One
or just because then you interrupt, right? So I interrupt. I'm like, oh, honey, you actually like. We've kind of been like letting that slide for like the last week, you know, like that's now an expectation that he knows he can do that. Yeah. And then I'm like almost taking his authority away because he's saying no. Yeah. And then I'm interrupting. So I've been trying to say, oh no, we say yes, daddy. Like you listen to daddy. Yeah. Right. So I've been trying to do that. But how would you deal with like a situation, or how would you advise someone to deal with a situation where there's kind of this dynamic of like, but it's not that's not a battle. I don't want to fight that battle anymore.
I would, first I saw this one couple do it. Was amazing. On his way home, driving home, that whole time he's driving is talking to you about the day. That's it. Okay? You're on the phone with him, talking to him. How did it go? This happened here. You're updating him on the kids and things. So he knows what he's walking into. So that's one option. I've seen that with great success because now he can tell you everything how work went. So you can know how work was really horrible and he's going to come in a bit stricter than normal. So one of you either dumping on the other at that time or just talking to each other at that time because it's the same time every day. You can count on it. And you're just talking to each other instead of the news or their music or whatever, audiobook. You're just together on that one. The one too would be to have a code with him coming in from work. How stressed out is he? Is it a 1 to 10? Give me a 1 to 10. I need to know, because if it's a 10, I'm getting the kids out to the park. Yeah. Because having that secret language kind of a thing to know how every person is doing. Right. Yeah. And having him, again, get down to his level and tell him why it's important to him. No kids are in the kitchen. And there might be a great story. Maybe something happened to his grandfather, got hurt as a kid. Okay. And that way he understands this is important to daddy, have him talk to him and tell him why. And he might be more fearful. He doesn't know them as well as you do. So he might be more fearful of them in the kitchen.
They're going to get, right. He's going to drop on them. Yeah, totally.
Right. And so that's his fear. And we honor that by not going in the kitchen because he's afraid, but to help the kids understand that this is daddy's rule because it's going to make daddy happy because he knows you're not at risk for this. It's out of love. Or is it out of love or is it just something he grew up with? Yeah. So again, figuring that out so that way you're on the same, on the same page, because coming in, you got that transaction and you know how tired you are. Yeah. 6 days a week. Yeah. But he's also had work stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And they're different stresses and there's different things. And so just communicating
different
about
urgencies. Yeah. Because with you can't just sit down and rest. You can't. He can, but he might have more life and death things in the long run.
Right. Okay? Exactly. Yeah.
So the urgency is just the timing kind of a thing. Yeah. And so building in again routine that when dad comes home, this always happens. I mean, we knew when my parents came home, dinner was always exactly the same time. But came home, immediately watched television, had a cup of coffee, and you just don't mess with the routine. Mm-hmm. And the more things you can routinize, the more kids feel stable. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing with Eli's energy everywhere is a thing called the burrito. Okay. So you take a blanket and you have him lay down, you swaddle him. Just like you did with Lucy. You swaddle them. It's called the burrito. So their head's out. You roll them up on the floor. You're down there on the floor with them. And you check in to see if he's all made right. And then you ask him, what would you like on your burrito? I want cheese. And now you're doing this outer body massage kind of a thing. Now I want sour cream. Okay. Unbelievable. I've done that with just kids. And I had predator and prey playing together. because they got the stimulation and the pressure they needed. Okay? When he's going really wild, and you call him to you with a wonderful warm face, and you wrap him up in a bear hug, and you take him off the floor, okay, even just an inch or two, you're bringing all of this energy back in. It's amazing. I did that one time in the public school when I was working at the lowest performing school in the state of Oregon. And these are the wildest kids I'd ever met because I came from little bucolic sisters. And here I am in this amazing school, 24 different languages in that same school.
Wow.
And I had this one kid, he was three in a family. All three had different dads. He had an African-American dad. No dads were in the picture, none whatsoever. And he was so whipping smart. But everywhere. And I got to the point, and he was only, I think, a second grader. And I got to him and I saw him and I would just hold him like that. Why are you hugging me? I'm not hugging you. I'm redirecting your energy. I'm just holding him. And I could get amazing stuff out of him. But goodness. Because they're not grounded. They're not grounded. They're never barefoot. They're not grounded. How do you ground? And so the burrito is an amazing thing because you're giving them swaddling, which is so helpful. Yeah. And you can just energize them. One funny story, my daughter was probably about 8 years ago, and she's a definite introvert homebody. And one day she was sitting in the recliner in the living room, and I was busy something in the kitchen, and I come out to the little dining area. I haven't said anything. I'm planning all this or that. And all of a sudden she goes, "Mom." I'm like, "What?" "Energy, it's coming out of you like tendrils." I'm like, "I'm not even talking." "You buck up." Okay, because I have a right to have my energy. But when you can see it or sense it or feel it, again, that full body embrace can help them be back in their body. The burrito is a great fun game because soon they can learn to do it to each other, and just a little burrito. Their heads are always out though, just like a swaddle. Yeah. But again, you're giving that motion, and you can get them to calm down.
I bet you Elijah would love that. He loves when Aaron comes home. He'll sometimes hold the kids upside down and shake them.
Yep. He loves motion.
Yeah.
He loves motion.
He's a sensory seeker, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's in special ed classrooms in the public school, they have these really big foam rollers that you put the kids in and you just roll them, and they're getting squishes to go through that. It's like, man, they need that in every classroom. They need, in Waldorf education, when they're building a school from scratch, they make the parking lot like a half a block away. Because what happens, just like when watching television, when you're driving, the images of the vision is going so fast, it stimulates a certain part of the brain, so that when they park the car, we want to get that stimulation out. And so they have a long walk into the classroom as preparation. Yeah. And so it's being intentional about stuff of how do we have this much, television or sound. When my daughter was 4, and we hadn't really discovered too much about Waldorf at the time. And I was visiting a friend in rural Oregon. And while we're visiting, she picks up a piece of gravel and she starts drawing on the car. I'm like, stop. And she goes, "No, Mommy, I know just what to buy to fix it." From a TV commercial. From age 4 on, we muted commercials till she was 16.
Wow.
All the time. We just muted them automatically. We're so rural. I mean, we didn't get cable till 2009. So, it was really, so we muted them. And as she got into grade school and stuff, she and her daddy would have fun just imagining what they would do. What do you think that ad's for? Wonder what they're doing here. And it just became a conversation piece without that brainwashing. Yeah. And it worked so really, really well because commercials are legally allowed to be louder than the program. Yeah. And so it's just like mute. And now you can talk. Every commercial, you can talk to somebody. Yeah. And so we just muted until she was 16.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's amazing, though. It is kind of amazing.
Yeah, because I said, you're my child. We're not going to let them own you.
Well, not only that, but it helps you with the imagination
Yes.
and like the play that you can come up with. It's kind of like, you know how many people love those videos where they have a clip and then there's someone else that has taken the volume off and then they like try to read their lips. It's called bad lip reading.
Okay.
I think. They had them on YouTube forever and I loved them. But they would just make up things and it would be so silly because you'd be like, that looks like this word. And so they would make these conversations. And yeah, it's so funny, but it's kind of like that.
It is. Instead of it competing for the affections of my child, I now have an opportunity for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Again, you have a lot of opportunity
to
control that environment.
Yeah.
You know, because for us, when we had a TV, it was in a closet in the back room. And so it was right. If you want to watch it, we got to pull it out. You make it hard.
Yeah.
You make it just a little more difficult. So I haven't had a television for almost a decade. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how to turn them on. I mean, I can turn them on, but that's about it.
Yeah,
the computers. Yeah. And then multiple and sound bars. Who needs a sound bar? What's a sound bar for? Things like that. So it's just, I'm not the most technical person on audiovisual stuff, but I stream really well.
Yeah. Hey, really quick, I just wanted to say that 71% of you that listen to our content regularly have yet to subscribe to our channel. If you're enjoying this piece of content, go ahead and click right now. It's a free and easy way for us to continue to bring the guests you want to hear and the conversations that you want to have. That being said, it's also a good way to help engage with us and have feedback so we know what type of content you want to hear and making sure that every episode is worth your time. Thank you so much if you have already subscribed, and if you haven't, go ahead and click the button down below.
The other thing we did really successful, even when in the summers, I'd always have to integrate in my grade schoolers for the summer program. And so we would, at the beginning of the summer, we'd sit down as a group and we'd create our summer rules and we'd have them posted. The little ones already knew about walking, feet, gentle hands, quiet voice, and things like that. But we'd have to do certain things like, you're not allowed in the closet with a second child, or we take turns in the bathroom this way or that way, those kinds of things for the grade school. But also what we did was I always had a being good jar. And so when I caught them being good, and I would take, you can call them glass gems in your Dollar Tree, whatever. We call them dragon tears. But you take a gem and you put it in the being good jar, and you can just see it getting better and better and better. And so we do the being good jar. And then at the end of the summer, if we got the jar full, and I always made sure we got it full by the end of the summer, because it took them a long time, we had root beer floats or something like that. But the being good jar, other parents have been successful when they needed someone to sleep in their own bed, or when they needed someone to not wet the bed, things like that. You have something. One mom used like an artificial flower and moved from one vase to the next vase. Something that was tactile they did, and something visual. And so then that way they can treat. But again, being good jar is trying to build that community. We all count. I don't care how good you are. I care how good we are. It's like that common good, because the common good's missing from society right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want the common good. So the being good jar, I've won many a situations with the being good jar. Because I always want to make it easy to be good.
Yeah.
And so, and that's I don't know, who Dorothy Day is? She's a Catholic, amazing Catholic. She started the Catholic worker movement.
Yes.
That does houses of poverty, houses of hospitality and stuff. Mm-hmm. Her partner who founded it, Peter Marin, he had a wonderful saying I adopted early on called, "Make it easy to be good." And so in the classroom, when I would notice some behavior I didn't like, how can I make it easy to be good? And so like if they're running, I would rearrange the furniture. So you look at what do I need to do to make it easy to be good? Well, if their hands are doing things I need to give them something in their hands I do want them to do. Mm-hmm. Make it easy to be good. And so that's a big part of my philosophy of life. I mean, it's like if I want to motivate something to do good, I always want to promote the positive and not have to nag on the negative.
Yeah.
So make it easy to be good. I mean, how can I get to work on time better? Or how can I do this better? How can I pre-prep my meals better?
Yeah.
Make it easy to be good. But the visual is very helpful.
I think as a parent, one of the things that I've done with adding another child is my mom was great about being like, you need to prep your food, because if you don't have to think about breakfast, if you don't have to think about lunch, and if you know what you're having for dinner, even if you don't make dinner in advance, at least you had breakfast and lunch ready for the whole week. So that's one thing I think when you're saying easy to be good, that takes some stress off of me, that now I can put that time that I was like planning or like whatever into the kids, which is great, or into getting something done or helping Aaron out with something. I have a little bit more time because I'm not focusing on
you're not having to think, you're not using brain energy. And that is, lots of women I've talked to said, I don't mind cooking, it's always coming up with what it is. So again, just do a 2-week rhythm and stick with it, and if Aaron complains, you see if he even notices. He might not notice.
Aaron doesn't care. I'm the one that's like, I'm the one that's like, I want something different. We've had this too much.
But then choose a day that's your different day.
Yeah.
And you build it in so like when he's there rested, able to help you, like make your special day every Saturday, something like that. And as they're growing up, I mean, probably not with,
they would love, like, who doesn't like Taco Tuesday or Pizza Friday or whatever.
And just to know, but again, you're building that rhythm. You're helping them know the world is safe because they have those expectations, Yeah. And can Ellie do pizza?
We can do gluten-free stuff. So we actually have a really good gluten-free bread or flour that we have. I haven't tried a recipe for pizza yet. Okay. But pizza's hard because she also has a sensitivity to tomatoes and she's also allergic to dairy. So do we do pizza very often?
No. Well, if you ever want to buy one, though, I would highly recommend Americana pizza because it's vegan and you can adapt things and it's got Is it good though? Oh yeah.
That's the problem, is most of the time when it's vegan cheese, I'm like, oh, this stuff doesn't taste good.
No, my daughter really likes it. She never says she's vegan. She'll say she's plant-based, which is a better way of looking at it and things. But yeah, dairy's hard because it's fat, and we're the only animal that drinks somebody else's milk. So we can live without it. But
but it's so easy. It's so
grilled
easy.
cheese,
Well, and it's not only that; it's like good fats where it has a decent ratio for protein to fat, and kids especially need that fat for satiation
and growing.
So so dairy's been hard. Tomatoes have been really hard too because they're in a lot of sauces. And, things that you like to eat, but okay, but going back, so one of the last questions I have for you is, we talked about this before, but when you brought up social media and what parents have to look at, right? So with the idea that we as 2025 parents out here are so inundated with technology, and comparing, you know, what the perfect, like, this is how your day should look. This is the structure that you should have, or this is how we demonstrate gentle, whatever, parenting of some kind. What are realistic expectations versus unrealistic expectations? Where when we're talking about the 3, 4, 5-year-olds,
right, the little ones, right.
What are those unrealistic expectations that you see parents fall into often, and what are some unutilized expectations or unutilized, untested expectations that they're capable of doing, but we don't necessarily push them to.
So first of all, it's really critical to understand child development. What are their skill bases? What can they do? And that can just be picked up, academically on looking at milestones, is what they'll usually call it, milestones for development. One of the things was really interesting, that one way that several communities have been approaching getting rid of child abuse or reducing child abuse was they taught child development classes in high school. Because what it ended up being was, a young parent expecting a 3-year-old to do something only a 7-year-old can do. And they would get angry and punish them outlandishly, things like that. And so understanding those developmental milestones is really, really critical to have an idea of I don't like to use the word normal, but what's common. All right. I mean, my nephew ended up he had an intrauterine stroke but his parents had no idea about the milestone, so they didn't think anything of it when he wasn't even moving much at 6 months. Okay. But so it's not so much the comparison for worry, but just the comparison for knowing what the milestones are and in the order that they are. So sometimes parents can have, sometimes it's not so much the parent who has raised them. Sometimes it's that step parent or the boyfriend or somebody who's not been around them to see how they have grown and have higher expectations of them, at that moment. Like, you've got to go get me, make me a sandwich, or you've got to go do this or that, those kinds of things. And so knowing what they should do. I know I've had quite a few parents when I had the preschool who wouldn't realize what their child was capable of doing. That, oh my gosh, no, they know how to do that. They can do that by themselves. Because in their time with them, especially if they're working, and I had them, 5 days a week, all day, I knew their child better than they did. Right. And so they would think the child couldn't put their shoes on without help. But I knew they could. But they'd only known the child when the child was younger. Previously. And so they don't assume that they know more. And yet they do know more. Amazing things that they can do, because they've been allowed to do. But some of the unrealistic expectations has to do with some of the behaviors of, just some of the milestones, like with toileting, tantrums. Some of the things, again, though, that if you see tantrums, oh my gosh, I remember the lesson I had. My neighbor was only 25, and I think she already had 5 kids, very young, had them early, started at 16, but very attentive. And here I am, much older, only one child, and one of the things she says is that they can't be good when they're tired. They can't be good. So we always use the word running out of being good juice. And the only way you can get being good juice is by going to sleep. That's it. You need some being good juice. And when they're tired or when they're hungry, they have no being good juice. Yeah. Okay. The child's not going to recognize that they're tired a child is always going to say, I'm hungry. Even if they just finished from the table, because they can't differentiate being hungry from being tired until they're about 7 years old. Wow. So they're going to always say, I'm hungry, but they're really tired. But physically they have eaten, they are fine. Yeah. But they are going to, and you'll find that with yourself, when coming home from work and you think, boy, I'm really hungry. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm really tired, because you have to pay attention inside. So because they can't have that, they don't have that interoception yet of knowing the difference between being hungry and being tired. Again, your parent role. And that's why we always just said, you need being good juice. And the only way you can fill up your tank is by resting. That's it. There's no way around that. Mm-hmm. Because if they should not be hungry, that you just watch them eat, okay, then it's an issue of being tired. But introducing some of those kinds of terms, it's because so many times a child will think they're being punished by taking a nap. And it's like, no, you're so lucky to take a nap. The research is tremendous. Take that nap. But no, you're not losing anything. I can't play because I got to take a nap. No, you're filling your tank with being good juice. Yeah. Or this is mommy's time. I need some being good juice. So do you think you can go to your room and I'll go to mine? Because mommy needs some being good juice, because I am just so tired.
Does need some being good juice.
Right. Because then you can only get that from sleep, And so understanding some of those biological developmental things is really, really critical. And when my little 25-year-old neighbor said, no, she can't behave because she's tired. Oh, well, she wasn't talking that much, so I didn't know. But she knew, because she'd already done several kids. Yeah. And that was such an eye-opener. The same thing Like, my daughter used to just cry as a baby. And I'm like, wait a minute, I did the whole thing. She's not hungry. She's not hurt. She's not cold. I'd gone through my list, right? And then my mother, a very wise woman, she said, no, she's overstimulated. Mm-hmm. She needs to have a quieter environment. And again, that's where the full body hugs, the snuggling, and sometimes they just got to cry it out, mm-hmm. Things like that. She came to visit once when my daughter was 3, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, first one that wiggled, 3-year-old. And I wanted to respect her because I want to be a good modern parent. And my mother's like, no, you told her to go to your room. You need to enforce that. I'm like, well, what do you think? Well, she went over and she says, look, see this line at your doorway? Your feet may not cross it. So she just sat there right at the edge, reach out with her hands, try this and that, but she did not cross it.
Yeah.
And it was like, I needed to be the one to say, do not do that.
Yeah.
Oh, and my mom showed me. Thank you. All right, we got that. Yeah. We got it. Okay. That was way before Waldorf teacher training and stuff, but just all children thrive with boundaries. Yeah. They thrive when they're safe. Even my Girl Scout troop I said, all right, basically I told you in the circle, all right, anything in the circle you can do, you step out of that circle, we're going home.
Yeah.
But, that kind of a thing. They need to know it's clear. And that's why for you,
and consistency. Right?
Yes.
Consistency and follow through.
And that's why for you and your husband to figure out that coming home transition time, or is every Friday night his night in the kitchen. So the rule for Friday is that, and try again, it's having that predictability builds that security within the child. And seriously, it relieves you of all the decision fatigue on just all of that. But as parents, you have to really think through who you are, because you could be expecting them to do this. And I'm like, why are you expecting that? And again, it could be something you saw on television, something on social media. It could be, just anything, right? Or a comment somebody said, at the park.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, but I'm not my child. I am responsible for my child. And if my child does something, she is her own person my child. My responsibility is to remove those fetters, the thing that crowd out her life, so she can discover who she is. The whole purpose of Waldorf education is to be free, period. That is the whole focus, is to be a free human being. And even in early childhood, when we are removing the plastic, we're removing the media, okay? And in elementary school, when they draw and create their own books of learning books, their lesson books and things, we're removing that. They never would wear advertisements on their body. They are not that brand. Our job is to help them remove that, so that when they finish, they are a free, fully formed human being. And if we think of that as our parenting mission, and we get lost in a very comparative social media post, we get back to 10,000 feet. Because everything either takes us toward God or takes us away. There's nothing in between. And if you keep that in mind, and you realize my job is to raise a child who is free, loved by God, and knows their worth. Sorry, lady on the YouTube or whatever. Sorry, not me. That's my, so if again, you don't look at them like kids are like my fancy car shows,
right?
They're not, they're not. They're such gifts.
Well, and it goes back to your story, right, about the cobbler.
Yes.
Because your child really, in a way, like, what do they say? Your first experience of God is through your parents.
Yes.
That's one thing to remember, but at the same time, like, we have to stop and see Jesus in all of our children as well as everyone else.
Right. And when they're teenagers, you know how you do that? You go watch them sleep. Yeah. And you remember how cute they used to be, and just like, okay, Lord, another day, I really need you. And you value the moments when they're beautiful, It doesn't matter how goth they are or emo, or it doesn't matter. You sneak in when they're sleeping and you get reoriented. And you get strong again.
It's so funny because Aaron yesterday, we were looking at Lucy as she slept, and he goes, she's so cute when she sleeps. And I said, aren't all kids cuter when they sleep?
They are, and they don't make a mess, and they don't eat, and no crumbs, and just...
no crying, no needs, no...
Right. And that, again, is really important in my perspective to help them understand the value of sleep. They're not losing out. They're not, they're not. That's like they're refreshed when they awaken. Yeah. And just to have that as, I don't know. I mean, our American society is so competitive.
Yeah.
Sleep is in the way, and it's like, how can we turn that and make them understand that this is the time that you're perfect,
Yeah.
And so it's, they're just amazing. God is so creative.
He is so amazing. You know what's so funny, though? I thought about this earlier when you were bringing something else up. But Thomas Aquinas, he talks about, like, when we're having a bad time to get out of something, he says, one of the first 3 things is you need to drink something, eat something, and sleep. Yep. Those are he has other things on his list, yeah. But, like, those are, like, the top 3
usually
things.
Water.
Yeah, water.
We're so dehydrated in our society. Water. Yes, and eating. Yeah, and then usually you go meet somebody. I mean, I would love that.
He has a whole list of like things, how to get out of, I think he said, what is it? I think how to get out of a depression or how to get out of something.
Yeah.
Anxiety. Maybe it's, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I just remember, I heard it in college and I was like, sleep, eat, drink, water.
Yeah.
Just like,
again, you're feeding the human body.
Probably exercise is probably on that list too of his.
Move your body. Yeah. The benefit of children, especially being in nature, oh my gosh, it is so critical. The sculpted parks are really pretty and the grass is so green and everything is sculpted, but wild land where they can push against bushes or climb a tree and it's just so. I mean, one time I remember it's so funny. In our town of Sisters, about 4 blocks away, was this undeveloped forest land owned by the U.S. Forest Service. And the kids have been going there since they were 3 and 4 years old, climbing the branches and the slags and all that stuff. And one time, one of my after-school boys, and I think he was 9, and he climbed up a tree and he couldn't get down. Okay, and he climbed it up. All right, and so I sent my high school helper up, but she couldn't quite get him. And so then soon the people from the I asked her my high schooler to go over to the pawn shop and ask if we can borrow a ladder. So then a couple of guys come over from the pawn shop and they're talking about it, and we got to call the fire department and get him down. And I'm like, no, he's been climbing these trees since he was 4. He will be fine. Okay, and they wanted to go rescue him. And so the ladder helped my high schooler get up that last little bit, just got him off that one part, and he came down on his own. I'm like, don't rescue them. Come on. How do how do they figure a puzzle out if you don't let them?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to let them. And so, if they break something, you mourn the loss of the thing, help sweep it up, but it's gone. If you just go and immediately replace it, how do you value the relationship they had with what they lost? Yeah. And it's like, it's okay. They don't have to have everything, they don't have to have everything. When we would make fruit salad every spring and summer, the kids had real knives, and they would sit there and they would cut their fruit and put it into the fruit bowl all the time. If they cut their finger, we would lament and, all right, direct pressure, hold it over your head, let's go get a Band-Aid. But we're not stopping fruit salad. Because it's our food,
Yeah.
And then we'd also make bread every week from scratch. And so they had their own bread, and we would sing the bread song about kneading it, and they'd bake up their own shape, and that was their snack. And, just use their whole body.
That's my question, though, is what age were you starting to do all of those things?
3.
3?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But again, I had 3 and 4s. I did not have a baby or a 2-year-old, so I could do that. But that, like, the recipe for the bread was very, very simple. Okay. And then, Ellie's certainly old enough. At the table, then you give them their own little blob of dough and they play with it, and you sing the kneading song. So they're kneading it nicely, and then let's go bake it up, and you've got your snack, and they value it. They're not going to just throw it away. They value it. They made it,
We have these little, like, wooden knives. They're like a little wooden, like, kind of.
Yeah, like a Melissa and Doug and Melissa.
Yeah, kind of. But the one that I have is very sharp, actually. I was very surprised. I was like, oh, yeah, like, that's pretty sharp.
They need to do real work.
Wood. Like, if you were to press on it pretty hard, you can do some damage, I'm sure. But my son loves to cut up the strawberries.
Yeah.
I also realized this recently, so for any parents that feel this way too. Sometimes I realized I want this to be a task that's fun, so I need it to not be something that needs to get done. Because if it has a task that needs to get done...
then you have the product as the goal instead of the journey.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the one thing I learned recently. I was trying to make breakfast, and I was like, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
Because this is not, like, I have one kid that's crying.
Yeah.
The other kid that's, like, adamant on helping, but it's like...
Right. And then again, this isn't your day to help.
Yeah.
Building in that rhythm so he knows when it's his turn.
Yeah.
And at one point by 5, he can make lunch for everybody.
Yeah.
He can do sandwiches or whatever. I mean, just building up that responsibility.
So, like, you think at 3, is that when you can start having them help fold laundry?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
So, talk me through. So, to finish that question off, like, talk me through what are the responsibilities that a lot of times parents will be like,
we'll forget about.
Yeah, or just not be like, I don't want you to help or whatever. What are some of the things that they can do if you actually spent the time to practice it?
Well, and some of the things of the home skills, people forget that they really have an academic benefit to them. All right. So like at preschool, we had a placemat. They had a bowl or a plate, little, a sauce or whatever for holding their food. And they had a spoon or whatever the utensil was. So the children were responsible for setting the table. All right. What I'm teaching them also is called one-to-one math correlation. I'm teaching them math. Yeah. One chair needs this, one thing needs that. Okay. And looking at completeness, things like that. So I know that they're getting that benefit. Same like with folding laundry. I always give them just the towels and the hand towels and the washcloths. But when I'm watching them fold it into half and quarters, I'm teaching them geometry.
Right.
Okay. So I've got all of that stuff. They can help with, a lot of those kinds of things. With the washing of the dishes, we would get a dishpan and warm soapy water. And the kids would wash their dishes in the warm soapy water before they ever went to the dishwasher, because that way then they've got the warm water, the sensory, they're cleaning their plate, they're responsible for that, and then we'd go and put it into the dishwasher. Okay.
Would you have kids that like splashed water everywhere?
Yeah, we'd just say, no, this is not splashing day. We'll have splashing day soon.
Oh
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like up outside?
No, just or squirt guns outside, or or just something like that. Yeah, something fun. And you, because what you're doing is while you're setting it up, you're saying, all right, look, our plastic is going to cover this section, so it's going to be very important now that we're not splashing out of this, because this is an important part. But my kids are also used to, before nap time, they always wash their hands before going to sleep, because they put them near their face. But we specifically had like Dr. Bonner's lavender or rose soap in the water, so which helps calm them down, and the warm water, and then when they needed to go to sleep, what I did was I got some of the basic old-fashioned hot water bottles and then sewed a flannel cover for it. And so they would have a couple of minutes each with the hot water bottle as they're laying there on their mats. And then it would go, they would share it. Yeah. As they're, because it was something special like that. So water can be really helpful. But my kids were used to, they all learn to sew by hand, so they can do that with a fine motor manipulations, using embroidery hoop with a rather rough burlap and yarn. Okay, they learn that. The older
for writing, right?
That is a precursor for writing. The older kids will learn how to do finger crochet and do that because they're making chains. Again, fine motor. I'm building their motor skills because I don't need to waste the time on the letters and the numbers. I need to build their body. Waldorf is all about heart, heads, and hand. Okay, and American education is all about head. I want that. I want all of it. Okay, I want the whole human being who's going to be free. And so, but tying each other's shoes, helping each other button, again, that cooperative assistance can be really, really helpful as they're growing. But some of those home arts is just really, really important on things. And sometimes if you need to motivate them or shake it up, you could put on the timer and have a race, or make it really fun, or again using the being good jar and oh look, I saw that. Boom, there's a new one. All right, you're good. And you're engaged. You're not like telling them go clean up, but it's a fun thing we're all doing together.
Yeah.
And it's all, again, about the adult attitude. When I'd get so tired, because I'd work 10, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And on the weekends, I'm cleaning and shopping and stuff. I finally got to the point where I needed to remind myself. And so I'd go around singing, "Oh, I love being a teacher. Yes, I love being a teacher." I need to remind myself. Or I'd be going so fast, too fast, or product oriented or achievement goal.
Yeah.
And I had to I slowed it down to, "Do you know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man?" I slowed it down to slow me down.
Yeah.
And if I slowed me down, I was the energy person in the room. I could slow them down. And so having some of those songs or triggers and knowing when I'm triggered, let me,
I definitely have noticed that when I'm overwhelmed, it's chaos.
They feed off of you.
Absolutely.
Always, right. Yeah. And that, again, figure out what your center is or what you can do. And it was so funny when I'd ended up with like a 4.5-year-old who's singing my song and dictating from my rocking chair where I told stories of saying, "All right, you're doing a good job there, Sam. I like how you're putting it away." I'm like, "You little teacher." It was like, which is very nice because she just graduated from nursing school in Boise State.
Oh my
It's like, I know. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Because again, live in that positive. The negative's okay. Everybody sees that part. But you need to see that positive. That's why, again, when the two kids are fighting over who's putting away that one truck, I see the positive of, I've got two eager cleaners. I don't see the squabble over the truck. I want to compliment them for both being eager to put that truck away.
Yeah.
So it just sort of comes back that way. It's how you hold it. One year I had a wonderful teacher, but every Tuesday I could hear her in my next classroom, just grouchy every Tuesday. And I brought it to her attention and she realized, oh, Monday nights are tough. And I said, "You are not allowed to come in this building or touch my doorknob until you've taken that deep breath and got yourself ready." It's like that moments of prayer in the morning before your feet touch the floor.
Yeah,
this is how you are preparing for your day, because what you do is too critical. Waldorf in early childhood, we always wear skirts or dresses, always, because pants are very definitive. They define you. There's your leg, especially nowadays. Oh my gosh, with women's leggings and things, there's like nothing to be hidden. But with Waldorf, by having a flowing skirt, it doesn't define the legs. It allows for that sense of motion, which is very good. We don't want the kids concrete. And also, if your hands are full, they have fabric to hold on to. Okay. And it's just old fashioned, I know. And when I first started off, I just have my skirt in the car and toss it on over my jeans, until I fully understood. One of the things that Waldorf always does is that we do what's called wet on wet watercolor painting. Okay. So the paints are liquid. The paper is wet. All right. So because We don't want the children stuck in that's right or that's wrong. Okay. Certainly not in creativity. So if you think about it, when you use a marker, you make a line, it's it. That's it. It's done.
Yeah.
You use tempera paint on an easel. It's just like drawing with a pencil. It's just there. Okay. Not with wet paper and liquid high quality German Waldorf paints. Okay. The children might sit down and say, well, I'm going to paint a house. Mm-hmm. Well, when that wet paint touches that wet paper, they have no control over it. It goes almost like a tie-dye kind of a thing. Well, that doesn't quite look like a house. Now I'm going to make it into a truck, or now it's going to be this, or now it's going to be that. Okay. We want that malleability of their thinking, sort of like the metacognition. Okay. Yeah. We want that. So when they're 3, we only gave them one color and they got to use it, and they had to be very careful with their paintbrush, treat everything with respect. Okay. And good, paint smock over them and all that stuff at the table. When they got another year, we added 2 colors in. So they got to see how green was made, how purple was made. They got to see that. Again, they didn't have control because the water effect on the paper. And that's what we want. Because if they say, well, I'm going to go paint a house on the easel with tempera, and they don't like it, it's a failure. But with wet on wet, it can never be a failure because you don't have control. But you're creating beauty. By age 5, they've got 3 colors and having to learn how not to make brown out of everything. Okay? How not to make brown. When I did it when I had the little kids in, I think it was like a preschool or VBS or something, I would take tempera and I'd put like red on one hand and yellow on the other, and I'd have them go like this. Orange, and then now put handprints and things like that. But the whole one of the purposes again of Waldorf, while we don't want them stuck in that certain temperament, all right, is we want them to have that fluidity, to being able to grow so they can encompass all 4 of the temperament. So we want them. So
and also a part of that would probably be to respect all 4 too.
Yeah.
And see the value in each one.
Yes, definitely.
Because I've noticed this in our society that I was thinking about this the other day, but in our society, it almost feels like certain temperaments are regarded higher over others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because you can kind of see that in how the American society.
Well, yeah, in business world for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
things
like
when
that.
You're thinking
Yeah,
about consumerism or just like you said, the business world. You see those temperaments are highly, but that doesn't mean that the other temperaments are lower.
Not at all. Right.
And it really is. This is something that I was thinking about again earlier. Is a lot of the times opposites attract, and so spouses will marry their opposite.
Right.
And it's that beauty that how blessed are the kids going to be when those parents work together and they work through those things. And
it's like making that new color.
Yeah, it's making the orange.
Right. Yeah. And that's why they end up starting to look like each other after like age 80 or so, And again, they're just trying to keep away from that triangle so the kids aren't splitting them, but you're making it bigger and stronger, but if they've only see that this is the best way or that's the only way to do it, it's not it. And again, Waldorf is always communal. We do it together. I mean, we go as fast as our slowest person, and we're together. You're my butterfly class, and you're the leaping lizard class, and you're that animal class, and you're the rosebud class, and and we. Yeah, and we value that. And it's just so, they're just perfect how they are. And our job as parents is to raise them to be free adults by removing the fetters that bind them.
And that's another thing that you can take into your faith. Because we have to, what is the goal of our human life is to be
fully alive and who God made us.
And to be free from our attachments, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that could be sin. That could be, I know that if you look further into that, it really goes into like even being detached from like your family, right?
Yeah.
You go into the verse where Jesus is saying,
who are my mothers and father?
Yeah.
Right. And brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And we have to, it's the thing about turning it over to God and being free.
Absolutely.
Right? Turning it over to God and
Yeah.
realizing we don't control the outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the decisions we do make, I always want them to be that simple of, is it getting me closer to God?
Yeah.
Or is it taking me away?
Yeah.
I mean, that even is in food choices. It's in, everything.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, that's one of the reasons my degree at Catholic Theological Union is specifically in justice ministry, not social justice. No, not that, not charity, but justice. And all of Catholic justice comes down to the dignity of the human being. All of that human being is made in God's image. Every single one,
Yeah.
I wanted to put a bumper sticker on my car that said racial equity is God's plan. We're all made. My daughter's like, no, Mom, no, we're in Idaho. And I'm like, but it's like,
It's true.
I want to say, yeah, God doesn't have children who are not, that he's disowning.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, that's why the church has never declared anyone to be in hell, because everybody is redeemable. At the last second, it's not our business to know
who it is.
Right. Yeah. And so that dignity of the human being, and right now it's just the commodification of the human being, I mean, that's again, the inappropriate, immodest clothing, let's say, just the, well, when do we do the recall of the car? Well, how much is the lawsuit going to cost us, and how many deaths or how many people? I mean, all of that is just that commodification. Absolutely. And why do immigrants not count? I mean, they're human beings. I want to write to every single Catholic legislator and just whoop them with a noodle. But it's like, oh Lord, please. I have a frame for my license plate that I specially ordered. So it says, love one another. And at the bottom it says, pray for your enemies. Okay?
Oh, amen.
But somebody scratched off enemies. So, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So it's like, no, you got to pray for your enemies. All right? Every day. Pray for your enemies. Those who persecute you. Every time. Period. They were willed into being by our Lord. There's no option there. Yeah. There's no option. Yeah. Every human being. Abolition of the death penalty. I mean, every human being. And so Waldorf meshes really well with that respect. It just, my job is not as a public educator to get the people to be able to work in a factory. It's just not, I mean, that was what it was designed for.
And that's going back to the common good.
It is. And the lack of it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think a really good podcast, if anyone's interested, this really ties into the Catholic social teaching.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so we had a good one with Doug Alice.
Yep. I watched it. Yeah.
And he was talking about Catholic social teaching. We touched on a lot of this common good.
Right. The common good is critical.
Yeah.
Because Catholic social teaching is, the first time the term was used was in Quadragesimo Anno. Okay. So 40 years from Rerum Novarum. And the common good has to be there, all right? The idea of pulling them together, of a list of 7 or 9, that's an American thing, period. But it's just, that's why it's subsidiarity, doing everything at the lowest level so you can reconcile, see them. Yeah. Okay? My hero Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic Worker, she would never let her Catholic Worker houses become 501c3 nonprofits. She says, no, you're supposed to give to the poor because you give to the poor, not because you get a tax break.
Yeah.
And it was just like so amazing that, and it's sort of like, oh, okay, I can see that. And, or the value of solidarity. Mm-hmm. So at one of my parishes, every week we paid for 3 countries in the prayers of the faithful, and we did the whole world in a year.
That's amazing.
Just simple. And then at Coffee and Donuts, I put up a map so I could see where they were. And I'd had to find a couple, where's that? And my pastor was Nigerian, so he goes, oh, it's an island off of Zambia. Okay, now I know more. But with just 3, we just broke them down in 3 countries every single week. And then I had the map in the Coffee and Donut room where they could see where the country was.
That's amazing.
So simple. So simple.
Most of the time, the best, I think, and again, I think I talked about this with Doug, but sometimes the simplest things, or the answer is really just the simplest things.
Yeah, it really is. It's just so, and it's amazing how it's just,
even in parenting.
It is. Yeah.
So I guess the last thing I would ask is for any families with older kids, younger kids, anything, what kind of advice or what would be your parting saying or advice to them?
Remember what worked when they were 3. Remember what worked when they were 6. Because things that were effective at 3 are often effective at 6. Are they timeout people? Are they, a lot of times older kids will have to write a letter or write this, scripture quote or saying several times. I mean, just creative kind of punishment things. But at age 6, where they are discovering the fairy tales within a Waldorf curriculum, they rediscover them again at 6th grade.
Or 3, you meant?
No. 3 is all just any stories to tell. But by 3, you're looking at what kind of behaviors and what kind of discipline that works or not works. So for like your Eli, where if you take something away from him, it's not going to matter. He's just off to the next thing.
Right.
Okay. He's just fine. So you got to try to figure out where's that motivation. Okay. And sometimes you can't take something away or put him on a timeout that's taking away. Maybe he's only going to be reward centered, because the taking away, he's fine without it. I'm fine. I've had several kids like that, and the parents are like pulling their hair out. I said, no, head to the being good jar. You got to go to the positive, because he doesn't care about things that much. And so then you got to look and see, what was the value? Is it time with somebody? Is it something that's not a thing? But normally we just think of things, like that. But there's a lot of cycling through the child development as they're going through. So remember what was effective in, let's say, discipline ideas as they're growing up.
Would it even go into like high school? Does it get cycled up into teenage years?
Not usually, because they are coming to the age of, they're getting more developed and things like that. I mean, there's a huge change at 9. We call it the 9-year change. Okay, the 9-year change, it's dramatic. Okay, so up until the 9-year change, it could happen at 8, could happen at 9, depends on again how we even count birthdays. But they want to stay with you. They want to stay with you. They want to stay with you. But when the 9-year change hits, it's like turning a page, and now they want to be separate. I remember that my friend Margaret, her son, every time, always slept with the dog. When they went on a vacation, they had to kennel the dog. Well, one time they went, and when the dog was in the kennel, they couldn't get him in time when they got home. He always wanted to sleep in a sleeping bag in the foot of their bed on the floor. Okay, dog wasn't there. He needed that, and all the time. So all of a sudden, he's 9.5. They're on a trip. They come home. Dog's still kenneled. Mom gets a sleeping bag out, and he looks at her and says, "What are you doing? I'll sleep in my bed." It's that fast of a change.
Wow.
It's huge. That fast of a change, and all of a sudden now they are separated from from the parent, okay? But it also, Waldorf child development also follows faith development, okay? So from 0 to 7, you want your kids with you in church. You want them modeling you, okay? That's why several parishes won't do children's liturgy of the word, because it takes the children out instead of modeling them, okay? 7 to 14 is their time of joining. I'll be an altar server. I want to join Cub Scouts. I'll do the children's choir. It's a time of joining. Okay. 14 to 21 is a time of questioning. Why do I have to do that? Why is this like that? Why do I do that? Why? Why? All right. If they had that freedom to ask those questions at 21, they're like, why not? 21, they now have that freedom. Okay. So Waldorf and faith development, as the Catholic Church has seen it, sees it very, very similar. Okay. That's why where I was in rural Oregon, you can see all the people who got to 8th grade education and were stuck. You can't do that. That can't happen. You can't do that. We can't question that. You got to do exactly what the priest says. You got to do all that. because they didn't have that support going through the why.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why some people don't come home till they're 40, or they don't come home till they're 65, because they're getting that why. But once they've got the whys answered, they come home and they're back. Okay. And so it's so really important to see that flexibility. When I was at Catholic Theological Union dining with all the nuns, and again, coming from Central Oregon, it's not like we had a lot of nuns. And so they were a curious bunch. And one of them was a school sister of Notre Dame. And I said, "Sister, why Catholic schools? I mean, I'm of the age where it was all the parents' job to educate them in the faith and all that. What's the purpose of a Catholic school, especially like where Portland was, where it was all super rich now?" So she said, "Let me think on it." So she went, and the next day she said, "The purpose of Catholic education is transformation." I got it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because in Catholic high schools, I mean, we only have one, but in other dioceses have more, that's where they hold them while they ask the whys. And they take them to a Protestant church or to the synagogue, and they answer these whys. And only when they've had the whys answered can they come home.
And can they accept?
They can accept. Yeah, they can accept. Why not? Yeah, okay, I got that. You know, because my Protestant friends, aren't you upset women can't be priests? Nope. No. Over that one.
Yeah.
You know, I had my whys answered.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I can do that. But my advice then to parents really is to pay attention in the moment, what was successful, whether they're journaling or a diary or something like that. Because a lot of times, the kids will cycle through that effectiveness. And for like your very, very busy Eli, those are the hardest kind. So it's good that you have them first, okay? Because it's not an easy transaction. I take this away, you're sad, you're going to behave. It's not, okay? So again, he's the one you put more of that positive. We get to do this when this happens. And again, always the grandma rule of when this happens, then this happens.
Yeah.
And that, you know, those are the hardest ones, you know, and always remember that the second child never gets caught.
Yeah.
Always remember that, because a lot of times they set them up.
Yep.
And it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think the other one too is, again, look at them while they're sleeping. Yeah. Look at them and remember who they used to be, and remember they're a gift. There's so many other people who wanted wanted a child and couldn't have it, you know? I mean, just be thankful. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think this was very fruitful. I'm really hoping that I know this was good for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm really hoping that when people hear this, when young moms or moms with multiples hear this, that this really gives them some peace, especially for the early years. Because I think, again, a lot of us, I've heard this from a lot of moms, that it's, oh, you just survive. You survive until you're 5, you know, until your kids hit 5. You know, your youngest hits 5. It's like you're in survival mode. I hear that a lot. So
that's sad.
So I think with that being said, I just want to thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your expertise, and thank you for coming on the show.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week, and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.